Chapter 655. In the evening, Tan Xiu drove to Star City Airport. Although he didn't know why Mu Weining came to Star City at this time, he still had to pick her up. He even booked a room in the Long's dining hall. He figured that his mother probably wanted him to go to Shanghai to study, so Mu Weining probably came over to prepare to go to Shanghai with him. 6 o'clock. A beautiful figure appeared at the airport's exit. It was Tan Xiu, who was waiting outside. After seeing Mu Weining, he immediately waved his hand. But before he could put it down, his hand froze in midair. It was because he found that a middle-aged man and a woman came out together with Mu Weining. The man was handsome and the woman was gorgeous. The most important thing was that Mu Weining and the woman were somewhat similar. "You're Tan Xiu, right? He's a very good young talent." The middle-aged man behind Mu Weining was wearing a suit and tie. After seeing Tan Xiu, his expression was even more satisfied. The gorgeous woman also faintly smiled and said, "The man who can be fancied by our Weining is naturally the most outstanding. I'm very satisfied with you, Tan Xiu." Tan Xiu's lips squirmed. At this moment, even if he were a fool, he could still guess the identity of this middle-aged couple. He forced a wry smile inwardly, but a modest and cautious expression appeared on his face as he called out, "Hello, Uncle and Auntie. Welcome to Star City." Mu Weining's beautiful face was a bit flushed. A trace of helplessness and a bit of apology could be seen in her eyes. She said, "Tan Xiu, my parents insisted on taking me to Star City, so I—" Mu Jianhua interrupted her and said with a smile, "Tan Xiu, your parents tried their best to invite us to Star City before the New Year. Since we're not busy after the New Year, we came to visit you. Your relationship with Weining will be closer sooner or later. As her parents, we don't object to it, so we naturally want to get closer." Tan Xiu recalled the mysterious smile on his father's face in the afternoon and suddenly felt a bit helpless. Although he had already told his parents that he and Mu Weining were just a fake couple, it seemed that they didn't take it seriously at all. He could see the helplessness and apology in Mu Weining's eyes. After pondering for a while, he made up his mind. In any case, he was going to marry and have children sooner or later. Mu Weining was also aware of his own situation. If she was willing to make do with him, he would not have to keep resisting. He had been reborn, and the path of immortality had tempered his heart. Since there was going to be a woman throwing herself at him, it was not in line with his original intention to push her away. Everything was made clear. If they were willing, they could be together. If not, they could separate. With all kinds of thoughts churning in his mind, Tan Xiu quickly figured out some things. Facing Mu Weining's parents, he showed the attitude of a member of the younger generation. He took their luggage, called them to get on the car, and then rushed towards Southgate Town. At home, after greeting each other's parents, only then did Tan Xiu realize that today's meeting was not the first time for their parents. When they were in the imperial capital, both parents had met several times. Even Mu Weining's mother, Su Lingyun, had visited many historical sites and famous attractions in the imperial capital with Mu Weining's mother, Jiang Zhenli. On the second floor. After entering his room with Mu Weining, Tan Xiu let out a wry smile and said with a helpless expression, "I thought you had gone to Shanghai. Never did I expect that you would suddenly come to Star City with your parents today. Did the four of them decide on this matter a long time ago?" "I'm really sorry, Tan Xiu," said Mu Weining apologetically. "As a matter of fact, I only knew about it when I was about to leave for Star City. Otherwise, I would have called you in advance." Tan Xiu waved his hand and casually turned on the heater in the bedroom, saying, "It's all right. Actually, I've already told my parents about our real relationship. But they are still willing to do it, which shows that they like you very much. To be honest, I actually quite like you too. After all, everyone has a love for beauty. However, liking you is not love. I still have a lot of important things to do. So, if you're willing, we can slowly get along. As for how far we can go in the future, we'll talk about it later." Getting along? Mu Weining looked at Tan Xiu with disbelief, but a pleasant surprise was crazily growing inside her heart. So to say, the two of them were a couple? Kana's hunting ground. After a few days of recuperation, all the toxins in Jin Sanchi's body had been forced out, while Jin Sijia's injuries had also healed. However, neither of them left. They were waiting for the news of the investigation from the Strange Doors people. It was very important for them to figure out Tan Xiu's identity. After all, the immortal trove was too big of a problem. Even if there was only a sliver of chance, they must find a way to get it. Thump, thump, thump. A strange sound seemed to come from the distant sky, yet it also seemed to drill out from the bottom of their hearts. The rhythm of the sound was very special, as though it was a summon, causing Jin Sanchi and Jin Sijia's complexion to greatly change. The two men, who were cultivating in the room, looked at each other with disbelief in their eyes before their figures instantly disappeared. At the back mountain of the hunting ground. When the two of them flew lightning fast to the highest peak of the back mountain of the island, they raised their arms almost at the same time and rubbed their eyes. When their vision was restored and they were sure that they weren't seeing things, they knelt on the ground and kowtowed heavily toward the old man sitting cross-legged under the ancient tree on the mountain peak. The old man exuded a decaying smell. He wore a coarse linen gown and had his hair tied up in a bun. His wrinkled face had a pair of particularly deep eyes that seemed to contain a mysterious universe with the sun, moon, and stars blooming in it. He was holding a small drum in his skinny hand, from which the strange drumming sound came out. "Master, you're still alive?" murmured Jin Sanchi with an excited face. The old man in linen faintly smiled and said, "This old man didn't think that I'd still be alive. If not for the Imperial Dragon chart protecting my last bit of true spirit and foretelling that a great calamity would befall you too, perhaps I would have sunk into oblivion and eventually completely dissipated in this world." A great calamity befalling them? Jin Sanchi and Jin Sijia exchanged glances and suddenly recalled the crisis a few days ago. They immediately looked at the old man in linen with incomparable reverence in their eyes. More than 60 years ago, their master left them 2 magic tools and an ancient cultivation manual before he floated away and disappeared without a trace. After so many years, they thought that their master had already passed away, but they never expected that they would meet again in this life. The two of them were raised by their master, Heaven and Earth Taoist. When Heaven and Earth Taoist adopted them, he was already 180 years old. He left when they were about 20 years old. Now that he was still alive, it meant that he was now more than 260 years old. "Have you broken through to the Golden Core stage, Master?" asked Jin Sanchi cautiously. "As a matter of fact, I felt that I was about to break through to the Golden Core stage more than 60 years ago," said Taoist Qianquan with a nod. "That's why I lived in seclusion and eventually became a Golden Core expert. However, just as I broke through to the Golden Core stage, I was persecuted by an old blind man and was eventually trapped in the Nine ground. I entered the nascent soul stage if I failed and passed away. If not for the Imperial Dragon chart, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to escape." "Master, you said that you broke through to the nascent soul stage?" cried Jin Sijia hurriedly. "How could it be that easy to break through to the nascent soul stage?" Taoist Qianquan shook his head and sighed. "The Imperial Dragon chart stored your blood essence in the early years, and I injected it with my divination art. That's why I sensed that you were about to face a calamity and a bloody calamity. I didn't expect that you had to self-destruct your golden core and detonate the Imperial Dragon chart to finally escape from that abstruse ground." Self-destructing his golden core? The two brothers, Jin Sanchi and Jin Sijia, were dumbfounded. Although they had yet to reach the golden core stage, they also knew the consequences of self-destructing their golden core. "Master, are you all right?" Jin Sanchi's heart was full of emotions, but also full of worry. Taoist Qianquan forced a smile and said, "My cultivation has dropped by 4 levels, and now I'm only comparable to an early-stage golden core cultivator. Fortunately, I got the origin returning grand law before, so I didn't die from self-destructing my golden core and become a cripple. All right, let's talk about your situation. Did you encounter any trouble recently?" Jin Sanchi quickly recounted the recent events and finally bitterly said, "That immortal trove was occupied by Tan Xiu. We couldn't figure out the force behind him, so we didn't dare to act rashly." A glint flashed in Taoist Qianquan's eyes. the existence of the immortal trove made him pleasantly surprised. As a matter of fact, the reason why he escaped from the abstruse ground was not entirely for the sake of his two disciples. If he didn't find a way to escape, he was afraid that he would really sink there forever and eventually die. Wait for the news. The immortal trove is no trivial matter. Since we have an immortal fate, we must not miss it. Taoist Chen Kuan secretly made up his mind. Even if there was a great force behind Tan Xiu, he must still get involved. Even if there was only a 1 in 10,000 chance, he must still go all out. Otherwise, he could only maintain his current situation for a few decades at most. After that, he would certainly not be able to return to the peak and would inevitably die on the path of cultivation. Blue City. Standing side by side, Tan Xiu and Mu Weining looked at the faint streetlights outside the window with different thoughts in their minds. However, since the four elders were pushing for it, neither Tan Xiu nor Mu Weining would jump out to oppose it at this time. Otherwise, the result would only make their parents' faces turn ugly. When are you going back to Demonic City? Mu Weining was quite excited inwardly, but she concealed it very well. After a long silence, she finally took the lead to break the silence. The day after tomorrow, said Tan Xiu. Let's go together. Mu Weining said softly. I've brought my luggage, and I originally planned to go to Demonic City from Star City. No problem, said Tan Xiu with a smile. Mu Weining looked at Tan Xiu's smiling face and suddenly said, It's fine if you can't accept our relationship, Tan Xiu. At worst, we'll still be a fake couple like before. Whether we're a fake couple or not, it doesn't matter as long as we don't reject each other, said Tan Xiu with an indifferent smile. Let nature take its course. It's hard to say what will happen in the future. Alright. Mu Weining gently nodded. Chapter 656. By the time Tan Xiu and Mu Weining came down from the second floor, the fragrant dishes had been sent to the dining room. Under Su Lingyun's greeting, the two of them took a seat in the dining room. Looking at the happy and harmonious interaction between the four elders, as well as Mu Weining's heartfelt smile, Tan Xiu's etiquette was very considerate even though he didn't speak much. After the meal, Tan Xiu originally intended to send the Mu family of 3 to the Long's dining hall, but Tang Yunda and Su Lingyun urged them to stay, so they directly stayed at their home. Facing such a situation, Tan Xiu was a bit surprised, but he still accepted it calmly. Fortunately, Mu Jianhua and Jiang Zhenli only stayed in Star City for a day and returned to the imperial capital the next evening. Since Tan Xiu had to leave Star City, he went to the magnificent Tang Corporation and explained everything to Kang Xia. He also transferred a large sum of money to Kang Xia's account, and then took her to the Research Institute to introduce Mo Yi and the other researchers and professors to her. Do you want to go to my place tonight? When the two left the Research Institute, it was already 9 o'clock at night. Kang Xia, who was wearing a mink coat and sitting in the driver's seat, asked with an expectant look on her face. Tan Xiu wanted to refuse, but he looked at Kang Xia's expectant expression. He would leave Star City tomorrow and would not be able to see her for some time, so he hesitated for a moment before nodding and saying, All right, let's go to your place. Kang Xia was delighted and sped up the car. Her request was very low. She only hoped that she could get along with Tan Xiu more, and she would be satisfied. She thought that Tan Xiu would have a lot of time to meet with Tan Xiu during the winter vacation, but she didn't expect that Tan Xiu would be too busy and the two of them would only meet a few times during the entire winter vacation. Nearly an hour later, the duo arrived at the villa complex where Kang Xia lived. After parking the car in the courtyard, Kang Xia pulled Tan Xiu and entered the villa. Aunt Hong should be asleep, right? Kang Xia stood in the living room and looked around. She couldn't find the figure of the housekeeper, Aunt Hong, and immediately whispered. But this situation made her very happy. Tan Xiu smiled and said, You don't seem to like Aunt Hong seeing me coming over. Kang Xia's pretty face turned red as she said, How could I? I'm just afraid that Aunt Hong will disturb us. By the way, you haven't eaten anything yet, have you? Do you want me to make you something to eat? A smile appeared on the corner of Tan Xiu's mouth. He picked her up by her waist and walked upstairs. Then, he smilingly said, Haven't you heard of the saying that beauty can make a feast? You don't have to cook, I can eat you. You are annoying. The blush on Kang Xia's face deepened. She buried her head in Tan Xiu's neck, feeling incomparably bashful in her heart. Even though the two of them were an old couple, they didn't have sex often. She was looking forward to it, but she was also shy. Second floor corridor. Andy came out of the bathroom in her pink pajamas, drying her wet hair with a towel. When she saw Tan Xiu walking down the stairs with Kang Xia in his arms, an incredulous expression appeared on her delicate and lovely face, and her big round eyes were filled with disbelief. You guys? Andy opened her mouth and sobered up from her daze, but she was at a loss as to what to do. Tan Xiu was dumbfounded as he held Kang Xia in a daze in the corridor. Although he knew that Andy also lived in this villa complex, and her villa was just next door, he didn't expect that Andy would unexpectedly be in Kang Xia's villa at 10 o'clock. Kang Xia's slightly blushed face lifted up from Tan Xiu's neck. When she saw the dumbfounded expression on Andy's face, she suddenly remembered that she was the one who asked Andy to come to her place tonight to give her a set of high-end cosmetics that her friend had brought back from abroad. Suddenly, she groaned in depression inside and hurriedly got down from Tan Xiu. Andy, you haven't slept yet? Kang Xia's face was a bit awkward and helpless as she said with an embarrassed expression. A bit of anger was revealed on Andy's cute angelic face as she angrily ran to Tan Xiu's side. She directly pulled Tan Xiu's arm and angrily said, "You're a bad guy, boss. We agreed to share blessings and misfortunes together. But you actually eat it all by yourself." Kang Xia was at a loss whether she had to laugh or cry as she shook her head. Even if they agreed to share blessings and misfortunes together, this shouldn't be considered as eating it all by himself, right? Could it be that her man also shared it? Andy snorted at Kang Xia and then pulled Tan Xiu's arm. She raised her delicate face and said, "Boss, you can't favor one and discriminate against the other. You've seen boss's body, but you've also seen mine. China's men are all good men and have a responsible spirit. You should also be responsible for it, right?" Tan Xiu was also at a loss whether he had to cry or laugh. What the hell was this? Did he have to be responsible for seeing his body? He had watched a lot of Japanese romance and martial arts movies, yet he still had to be responsible for those excellent performers and actresses? Tan Xiu didn't want to be entangled in this matter, so he hurriedly said, "Andy, you misunderstood me. Kang Xia twisted her ankle, so I carried her and sent her back from the outside. Well, I've sent her home and now I'll hand her over to you. I'll go back now." Twisted your ankle? Andy looked at Kang Xia and then shifted her eyes to Tan Xiu. Then she immediately asked with a bewildered expression, "Is it really like this?" Despite her reluctance, Kang Xia knew that she wouldn't be able to keep Tan Xiu tonight, so she reluctantly nodded and said, "Yeah, it's really like this." Andy hesitated for a moment before she grunted and said, "I don't care. Boss just hugged you, so he also hugged me." Tan Xiu hurriedly said, "Andy, don't make trouble. If you sprain your ankle one day, I'll carry you back, okay? Alright, take good care of Kang Xia. I'll go first." After saying that, he immediately turned around and walked out of the villa's gate. Only then did he suddenly remember that he came here in Kang Xia's car. He didn't drive his own car. However, in order to avoid being entangled by Andy again, he went straight out of the villa complex and then dialed Mo's number. "Come and pick me up." "Yes." A minute later, the Land Rover SUV stopped in front of Tan Xiu. After sitting inside, Tan Xiu said, "Let's go back to Southgate Town." Mo said, "Boss, there was an unexpected situation just now. We found someone following us. Jean Hu and the others have gone to catch them and should be back soon." "Someone is following us?" Tan Xiu slightly furrowed his brows and said, "Then wait here." A few minutes later, a Mercedes-Benz SUV stopped next to the Land Rover Range Rover. As the door opened, Jean, who stood in front of the window and respectfully said, "Boss, we caught 4 people following you. We knocked them out and threw them in the car." For a moment, Tan Xiu was silent. Then he took out his mobile and called Kang Xia. Then he said, "Take them to the villa complex. Since they chose to follow me, they must not be good people. Interrogate them first and then we'll deal with them later." Inside the villa, Andy angrily followed behind Kang Xia. After entering Kang Xia's bedroom, she grunted with dissatisfaction and said, "Boss, you didn't twist your foot at all, did you?" "I didn't twist my foot at all," said Kang Xia with a forced smile. Andy's tone instantly raised and angrily said, "So, you're saying that you want to eat it all by yourself?" Kang Xia threw the bag in her hand on the sofa and sat down. Then she forced a smile and said, "Andy, we're both big girls. Can you not make trouble?" "Who's making trouble with you?" Andy angrily said, "I really like Boss. Boss, just look at the other men outside. Each and every one of them is a crooked melon and cracked date, full of filthy thoughts. The only one I like is our boss. Besides, I don't care even if Boss has a wife." "You?" Kang Xia opened her mouth. But when she saw Andy's extremely serious expression, she immediately said with a helpless expression, "Andy, we're indeed good sisters. We usually share everything. But this man, forget it. I'll tell you the truth. Our boss and I do have that kind of relationship, but I'm very clear that he still has some feelings inside his heart. Even if we do have that kind of relationship, it's impossible for him to give his heart to me. I'm even more clear about one thing. Even if it's me, I can't become his legal wife in the future." Andy blinked and suddenly pointed at Kang Xia with an astonished expression. "So to say, you're also a mistress?" "A mistress?" Kang Xia's face instantly pulled down and she helplessly said, "Can we not use this kind of address? Otherwise, we won't be able to talk anymore." Andy's anger instantly vanished and was replaced with a pleasantly surprised smile. She threw the towel in her hand to the side and then sat next to Kang Xia. She pulled her arm and said with a charming smile, "Boss, I understand now. You're just a little bit better than me. I don't care whether it's legal or not. Boss is so outstanding, so it's normal for him to have a few women. You know Lillian, right? She told me a long time ago that she doesn't want to be someone's wife in the future and must be someone's mistress. A few days ago, she even posted a photo on Facebook. It seems that she's with that glasses king from Hong Kong. She's a vixen, a little money grubber." Kang Xia snappily said, "I think she's right." Andy shook her head. "She pursues money, but she also pursues love. She said that only a capable man can control her, and only a capable man can win the love of countless outstanding women. If I can't monopolize him, then I'll share him." Kang Xia fell into silence. She grew up freely abroad and naturally knew Andy's thoughts. She was very open-minded about the relationship between men and women abroad. If they got along well, they'd stay together. If they couldn't, they'd separate. There were too many capable men overseas who had many women. In fact, there were many capable women who had many men. Her thoughts were seriously influenced. But how could she not be influenced by the Western way of thinking? Otherwise, how could she be short of men with her excellence? However, if she wanted to get the best man, she must be prepared to share him with other women, even though it didn't feel good. Forget it. Love can't be exclusive, but children can be exclusive. I must work hard. Kang Xia clenched her fists and looked out of the window with a firm expression. Chapter 657. After a while, Kang Xia turned her head and shot a deep look at Andy. She then raised her hand to pinch her small face and said, "Do whatever you want to do. In any case, I'm not happy that you messed up my good time tonight. Ouch, not only did I sprain my foot, but my arm, waist, and neck. You're responsible for massaging me." Joy could be seen in Andy's big bright eyes. She hurriedly climbed up the sofa and massaged Kang Xia's shoulders while giggling. "Boss, why don't you call boss now? I don't care what you say as long as you can trick him to come back." "Dream on." Kang Xia rolled her eyes. Ring, ring, ring. The cell phone in her bag rang. Kang Xia took it out and found that it was a call from Tan Xiu. She immediately picked it up and smilingly said, "Boss, Andy wants you to come back. She's waiting for you to pamper her." "Cough, cough, don't make trouble. You two get dressed. I need to go to your villa for something." Tan Xiu coughed twice and then seriously said, "What is it?" "Interrogating the enemy." "All right." A few minutes later, when Kang Xia and Andy came to the hall on the first floor, they saw Tan Xiu coming in. Aside from Mo and the others, There were also 4 unconscious men on the ground. "Boss, who are they?" asked Kang Xia with a puzzled look. "They were following us in secret and were discovered by Ao," said Tan Xiu. "Ao will wake them up." Mo nodded and walked to the front of the 4 men. He used the most brutal means to break their wrists. After they woke up from the pain, he then walked to Tan Xiu's side. "Who are you?" The 4 men's wrists were broken, but they didn't let out any screams. The eyes of the burly man who asked the question were filled with dense, killing intent. Had it been an ordinary person, they would have screamed by now if their wrists were broken. Tan Xiu sneered. "Speak, or you. Why are you following me? We don't know what you're talking about, nor do we know who you are." The big man snorted coldly. "This is a society ruled by law. I hope you can let us go. Otherwise, the crime of kidnapping is very serious." Tan Xiu sneered. "Didn't the person who sent you to follow me tell you who I am? Do you think you can deal with it if you don't go back on your word? If you're smart, tell me who you are and why you're following me. Maybe I'll spare your lives. Otherwise, you won't just end up dead. I have too many ways to make you wish you were dead." The burly man's pupils shrank, and his body couldn't help but twitch twice. Suddenly, he took out a sharp dagger from his bosom and stabbed it into his companion's heart. Bang! Mo immediately attacked. He kicked the man's head and knocked him out. Then, he quickly checked the man whose heart had been pierced. He then turned to Tan Xiu and shook his head. "There's no hope." Tang Xiu snorted coldly and looked at the other 2 pale-faced men who were obviously frightened. Then, he lightly said, "I understand why he suddenly killed your companions. He was afraid that your companions would divulge the information. Since one of you will die, then there's not much difference between 2 or 3. Do you 2 want to hide it? Or do you want to tell the truth?" "I'll tell you." One of the men angrily looked at the fainted big man and immediately said, "We're from the Strange Doors, intelligence agents of the 8 Families Alliance. The order we got is to investigate your identity and figure out which force you belong to." "People from the Strange Doors?" Tan Xiu frowned and coldly snorted. "Who gave you the order?" "I don't know." The man shook his head. "He's our leader and the person in charge of the direct contact with the people above. However, I know that there are a total of 6 teams sent to investigate you, and each team has 4 people. We're the first to arrive in Star City, and there should be another 5 teams behind us. But they'll catch up in 2 days." Tan Xiu looked at the other man. "That's right. That's all I know," said the other man hurriedly. Tan Xiu nodded to Mo. Immediately after, Mo stepped on the other hand of the fainted big man and woke him up again. "Tell me, which one of the Strange Doors gave you the order to investigate my identity? I know what's in your mind and why you suddenly killed your companion. But I can tell you that your Strange Doors people are nothing but trash in my eyes. If I want to kill you, no one from the Strange Doors will live," said Tan Xiu coldly. The big man angrily glared at his 2 companions and immediately sneered. "You? We have a lot of people in the Strange Doors, and there are countless people with special abilities. Not to mention, forget it. I advise you to let us go, else you'll die." "What do you want to say? Is it Jin Sanchi and Jin Sijie, those 2 cultivators?" Tan Xiu indifferently said. The big man's body shook and disbelief filled his eyes as he involuntarily exclaimed, "How did you know?" "It seems they sent you to investigate me, didn't they?" Tan Xiu sneered. Had I known they wouldn't give up their evil intentions, I would have directly killed them in Kanas to avoid any future troubles." "You?" The big man stared blankly at Tan Xiu as his heartbeat increased sharply. Although he didn't witness what happened in Kanas, he had heard a lot of information. Never once did he expect that this guy in front of him could say such words. Could it be, apart from killing the Serenity Sect's young master Xian Yugu and exquisite chess saintess personal disciple, Wang Hu, he also severely injured immortal masters Jin Sanchi and Jin Sijie? "It seems you know a lot of things," said Tan Xiu indifferently. "That's right, I spared Jin Sanchi and Jin Sijie in Kanas because I didn't want to kill more people. It's just that I didn't expect that they wouldn't give up their evil intentions and still want to scheme against me. Tell me, where are they now?" "I don't know." The big man was full of fear, but he still shook his head. Tan Xiu's expression turned cold. He released a stream of qi from the void and wrapped around the big man's neck, directly pulling him up from the ground and hanging him in the air. I just don't want to be too troublesome, so I want to know where they are from your mouth, said Tan Xiu with a sneer. Else, I can wait for your follow-up investigation team to arrive. I'm sure some of them will know where Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie are. The contest between cultivators is not something small shrimps like you can meddle in. If you don't tell me, I won't give you another chance. I'll make you wail in pain for 3 days and 3 nights. I'll break your bones and break your tendons and meridians, and then I'll let you take your last breath. The big man was thrown to the ground again. His face flushed red and he coughed painfully. Then he roared with bloodshot eyes, "You want to know from my mouth? Dream on. If that's the case, I'll investigate your family and kill all your clansmen in the strange doors," said Tan Xiu casually. "I hope there are fewer children and old people among your clansmen. I'll tell you." The big man's body trembled and his eyes were full of despair. At this moment, Tan Xiu was a devil in human skin in his eyes. He could die, but he was perfectly aware that his clansmen would be killed if a cultivator wanted to retaliate against his family. Like Tan Xiu said, they would be tortured to death. 2 immortal masters are in Kanas. Tan Xiu nodded with satisfaction. Just as he was about to speak, his complexion suddenly changed. He got up and kicked the big man to death before directly killing the other 2 men. Then he looked at Mo and shouted, "Call the people staying in Longquan Bay's immortal cave. Tell them to evacuate immediately and find a place to hide." Mo's expression shifted and he immediately took out his mobile phone. What made him helpless was that he called several times in a row, but he couldn't get through for the time being. "There should be no signal there, boss. I can't get in touch with them." "Bastard!" Tan Xiu cursed. He quickly grabbed his mobile phone and dialed Jie Weili's number. "Brother Tang?" Jie Weili's voice came out of the phone. "There's something I want to ask of you, Brother Jie," said Tan Xiu quickly. "It's very dangerous and may cost my life. But you're the only one I know in Kanas who can help me." Jie Weili was silent for about half a minute and then asked with a solemn tone, "What is it?" "There are 4 of my men in a valley in Longquan Bay," said Tan Xiu. "I hope you can rush there and inform them to evacuate immediately before anything happens to them. Later, I will send you a detailed map of the route through a photo on my phone." "Got it." After saying that, Jie Weili directly hung up the phone. Tan Xiu put away his mobile phone with a bit of apology in his eyes. He didn't have a deep friendship with Jie Weili, and asking him for help this time was a last resort. In case Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie were to return there, the 4 men he had left there would probably suffer a tragic fate. He knew it. The moment Jie Weili agreed, he owed Jie Weili a huge favor. Regardless of whether he was dead or alive. "I'll deal with these 4 corpses and then wait for me at Star City Airport. I'll go back to Southgate Town first." Tan Xiu got up and was about to leave. "I'll go with you, boss," Kang Xia quickly called out. Tan Xiu halted his pace. He turned his head and shook his head, saying, "Your cultivation is too low. Not only will you not be able to help me, but you may even become a burden to me. Staying here and taking care of the magnificent Tang Corporation is the best help you can give me. Also, what happened tonight must not be spread out." "I understand. Then be careful." Kang Xia nodded silently. "Don't worry," Tan Xiu said. "I won't risk my life if I don't have full assurance. Also, I'll leave the research institute to you. I'll go directly to Shanghai after I'm done dealing with the matters in Kanas. Just call me directly if there's anything you need." Chapter 658. Southgate Town, viewing building Wang Villa. Mu Weining had yet to rest. She wore a coat and quietly stood by the window. Through the gap of the French curtains, she could clearly see the dim light outside. She knew that Tan Xiu had a lot of things to do, but she didn't expect that he would be so busy that it was already so late. Should I call him? This idea had popped up in her mind many times, but she had rejected it many times. She was afraid that she would disturb Tan Xiu's work. She was also afraid that Tan Xiu wouldn't like it. Becoming Tan Xiu's official girlfriend made her worry about her gains and losses instead. At this time, she caught a light outside the window. 10 seconds later, she saw a car quickly enter the courtyard, and Tan Xiu came out of the car. However, she was as perceptive as an orchid. She was keenly aware that there was something wrong with Tan Xiu's expression. It was very indifferent with a trace of anxiety. Mu Weining hesitated for a moment before she immediately put on her coat and walked toward the door. When she came to the corner of the stairs, she saw Tan Xiu coming up. "Weining, are my parents asleep?" asked Tan Xiu directly. Mu Weining nodded and said, "They should be asleep." Tan Xiu grabbed Mu Weining's hand and pulled her to his room. After closing the door from the inside, he said with a serious expression, "I've encountered an emergency and need to go out of town. So you can only go to Shanghai by yourself tomorrow. Also, my mom keeps saying that she wants me to go back to Shanghai to attend classes, so we have to leave Southgate Town tonight. I'll give you a room in the Long's dining hall. You can rest for a night and then immediately go to Shanghai." "What happened?" Mu Weining asked with a worried expression. "Can I help you?" Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "It's not a big deal. I can deal with it easily. But the time is too tight. I need to rush there immediately." Mu Weining hurriedly said, "Then I'll change my clothes and pack up. We'll leave after that. Do you want to tell Uncle and Auntie?" Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "Since they're asleep, then I won't tell them. I'll call them tomorrow and explain it to them." "All right." Mu Weining agreed and returned to her room. 5 or 6 minutes later, he changed his clothes, packed his things, and walked out with his suitcase. After Tan Xiu took it, the two of them went to the courtyard at their fastest speed, got on the car, and left Southgate Town. Tan Xiu booked a room for Mu Weining in the Long's dining hall. After settling her down, Jean Hu took him to the airport. Fortunately, just as he arrived, there was a flight to Blue City. Therefore, he boarded the plane and left without any hesitation. Kana's Longquan Bay. In this chilly season, the two Wrangler SUVs roared as they hurried along and soon arrived at a fork in the road. Jie Weili, who was in one of the Wrangler SUVs, looked at the God map displayed on his mobile phone with a grave expression, as well as the location markings sent to him by Tan Xiu. "Turn left and drive on the small road on the left. About 5 kilometers ahead is the end of this path. Let's abandon the car and hurry on with our journey," Jie Weili instructed. Very soon, the two SUVs stopped at the end of the small road, and the mountain range ahead was already faintly visible. After Jie Weili got off the car, the 4 middle-aged men who followed him vigilantly observed the surroundings. This mountain range was very dangerous, with ferocious beasts often roaming around. There were even many swamps and miasma zones, and a slight carelessness could cost one their life. "Xiaowu, Dufei, you two drive the car away and wait for us in the nearby Longquan village. Remember, if we don't come back in a week, it means we've died in the mountains. Your sister-in-law, niece, and nephew will have to rely on you to take care of them later," said Jie Weili seriously. The middle-aged man called Xiaowu's complexion slightly changed and hurriedly said, "We'll go with you, Brother Jie. Even if we die, we brothers must die together." Dufei also hurriedly said, "That's right, big brother. Our lives were saved by you in the past. How can we cower in the face of danger?" Jie Weili happily patted their shoulders, but his expression quickly turned serious as he said, "Don't let me have any worries. I can work with peace of mind after solving my worries. The 4 of you are my closest brothers. You two don't want to get married, so there's nothing to worry about. But you two have families, so I must make you stay. Don't be stubborn. I've already made up my mind." Having said that, Jie Weili quickly took out his mobile phone and sent a few short messages. Then, he quickly disappeared into the night with the other 2 men. "Take care, Brother Jie. Take care, big brother," Xiaowu and Dafei shouted loudly. Walking on the mountain road late at night was very dangerous for ordinary people. However, Jie Weili and his 2 brothers often walked on the mountain road. Their physique was also very strong, so there wouldn't be much of a problem. They came out in a hurry this time and only brought a few changes of clothes, a small amount of hardtack and water, so they didn't have any burden on the road. Longquan Swamp. The starlight shone all over the sky, illuminating the place somewhat. On the flat ground at the entrance of the cave halfway up the mountain, a bonfire was burning with game being roasted above. 2 experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall were sitting cross-legged in front of the bonfire, chatting about some cultivation matters. On the opposite mountain peak 2 kilometers away from them, Taoist Qianquan was like a ghost, quietly sitting cross-legged under a big tree, overlooking the bonfire outside the cave and calmly watching the 2 experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall. With his current eyesight, he could still see clearly even at night. Jin Sijie's sky piercer halberd was taken by Tan Xiu, so he just asked the people of the strange doors to help him find a weapon. It was a very ordinary long spear, but it weighed more than 100 pounds. At this moment he was holding the long spear and standing beside Taoist Qianquan like a javelin. "Master, why don't we get rid of them earlier? Even if we wait for the investigation news to come, they won't know who did it since that surname Tang has a huge force behind him." Jin Sijie had a bit of hostility inside. The last battle here made him lose all his face and caused him to suffer heavy losses, so he wanted to kill and vent his anger. Taoist Qianquan shook his head indifferently and said, "Killing them now is no different from killing them later. Let's wait. Maybe there will be news soon." Taoist Qianquan shook his head and said, "You also said that it's the same when we kill them, so why wait? If we kill them now, we can go to the cave and find a way to open the Immortal Troves portal. Else, if that surnamed Tang notices something and comes back with a large number of experts, won't we have no chance?" Taoist Qianquan lightly smiled and said, "If we rashly kill people and enter the cave before getting the news, what should we do if that surnamed Tang brat comes back with his people and happens to block us in the cave?" Ugh! Jin Sijie was at a loss for words. "So, don't be impatient," said Taoist Qianquan. "Only by planning and acting can we live longer. If I understood this truth back then, that old blind wouldn't have. You wouldn't have been trapped by this old blind for so many years, would you?" An old voice drifted into Taoist Qianquan and Jin Sijie's ears along with the cold wind. Taoist Qianquan and Jin Sijie's complexion greatly changed. Taoist Qianquan, who had been sitting cross-legged on the ground, directly floated up and vigilantly observed the surroundings. His gloomy voice also drifted away with the wind. "Old blind, since you're already here, why don't you show yourself?" In front of the master and disciple duo, a blind old lady with disheveled hair and tattered clothes walked step by step in the air. Her footsteps were very slow, but every time her feet landed in the air, a circle of air rippled under her feet. "Old Taoist Qianquan, I never thought that you'd come out of the abstruse ground alive. Fortunately, this old blind didn't leave with that little doll, else you would have brought disaster to this place again, you heartless bastard." Taoist Qianquan's eyes turned slightly red, and a fierce killing intent emanated from him caused turbulence in the air around him. Despite Jin Sijie's strength being very strong, he was still forced back more than 10 meters by this killing intent. Only then did he stop with a pale complexion. Staring fixedly at the blind old lady, Taoist Qianquan fiercely said, "You're still alive, you damned old blind. How could this old Taoist die earlier than you?" Old blind faintly sighed and stood in the air several meters away from Taoist Qianquan. She then shook her head and sighed, "It seems that this old blind was too soft-hearted back then. I should have set fire to that abstruse ground and burned you alive. Though I wouldn't have to waste my strength to come out now. Old blind, I killed your whole family back then because your father ruined my good deed." Taoist Qianquan sneered. "You've been killing me for 60 years. Causing my cultivation to plummet and the imperial dragon diagram to be destroyed. Shouldn't the enmity between us be written off?" "I originally thought that it would be written off," said old blind helplessly. "But who would have thought that you wouldn't let me spend my remaining years in peace? Those 4 little guys are that little doll's people. They can't die, and that little doll can't die either. Therefore, if you don't give up on those evil thoughts, I'll have to act eventually. You've mentioned that little doll many times. Who exactly is he?" asked Taoist Qianquan indifferently. "You already know the answer, don't you?" said old blind. "Do you still need to play the fool in front of me?" "Tan Xiu?" asked Taoist Qianquan with a frown. "Who else could it be if not him?" said Old Blind faintly. That little doll promised to give me a place to enjoy my remaining years in peace, and I also want to find the opportunity to become a divine diviner from him. You plotting against him, aren't you plotting against this Old Blind? With a gloomy expression, Taoist Chen Kuan shouted, "What's the identity of that little doll surnamed Tang? To think that he can make you keep thinking about him, old fart? I can't see him clearly. I can't see through him." Old Blind shook her head. What? Taoist Chen Kuan's expression drastically changed. He was also proficient in the art of divination and calculation, but it was the heavenly divination art that he snatched from the blind Old Blind's father. He believed that he couldn't compare with this Old Blind in this regard. It was fine if he couldn't figure out the identity of that little doll surnamed Tang, but even she couldn't. What did this mean? Chapter 659. Taoist Chen Kuan looked at the blind old woman in bewilderment. After a long while of silence, he suddenly burst into laughter. A surging momentum erupted from his body as he sneered, "Old Blind, I didn't expect you to also learn to play tricks. Is there still a mandate of heaven in this era? I was almost deceived by you." Old Blind shook her head and sighed. She looked at Taoist Chen Kuan with pity in her eyes. She slowly took out a pair of golden gloves from her bosom and put them on her hands lightning fast. Taoist Chen Kuan's expression greatly changed and a look of dread appeared in his eyes. Picking the stars and catching the moon. This was Old Blind's most powerful technique. He was once suppressed by her with this technique and was trapped in the abstruse ground for so many years, where his soul was almost scattered. Taoist Chen Kuan took a deep breath and grabbed the small drum. Then, he coldly said, "Old Blind, it seems you really want to be that little baby's lackey?" Old Blind gently spread her arms. As the crutch in her hand turned into powder and drifted away with the wind, she faintly said, "If this Old Blind can have a place to stay in my old age, if I can get the opportunity to break through, then what's wrong with being a lackey? More than 100 years have passed by in a flash. What else can I see through? What else can I see through? You're courting death." Taoist Chen Kuan instantly threw the small drum in his hand and layers of drum shadows hovered above his head. Along with the drum beats, sound waves surged toward Old Blind like a tide. Heavenly secret, picking the stars and catching the moon. Old Blind's messy white hair suddenly stood on end. As she waved her arms, the golden gloves erupted with a dazzling light. Images of 6 miniaturized planets appeared in the night sky. As though they had been summoned, the images of the 6 miniaturized planets descended with a loud rumble. "Damn! You've actually mastered the hexagram star array." Taoist Chen Kuan angrily roared. His body rose from the ground and urged the layers of drum shadows to hit the 6 miniaturized planets. At the same time, he took out a sharp dagger from his sleeve and fiercely pierced his glabella. After forcing out blood, he quickly slapped it into the drum shadows. Layers upon layers of drum shadows instantly surged, and a layer of bloody light appeared on each of them out of thin air. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth from all directions seemed to be attracted by a strong force, continuously merging into the drum shadow. Explode! Heaven and earth Taoist's face turned red. With a roar, the dagger in his hand shot out. Boom! Deafening sound burst out from the collision of the drum shadow and the miniature planet. The tide-like airwaves spread in all directions. On the mountain behind heaven and earth Taoist, towering trees were smashed to the ground by the airwaves and flew hundreds of meters away. At the cave entrance of the opposite mountain peak, 2 experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall suddenly got up. They instantly unleashed their flying swords and coldly looked at the direction where Taoist Chen Kuan and Old Blind were fighting. Feeling the violent airflow sweeping past them, they exchanged glances and saw the horror in each other's eyes. They had already broken through to the foundation building stage, but the shockwaves caused by the battle between powerhouses still made their hearts palpitate. They'd gone through countless life and death situations, and their perception towards the might of a battle was extremely acute. So, they knew very well that the gap between them and the powerhouses in battle was absolutely like the difference between the heavens and the earth. "I don't know them. One of the Everlasting Feast Hall's experts took out his binoculars and shook his head after observing the two men's appearance. Bush, bush. Two figures flashed out of the cave lightning fast. After they figured out what happened, one of them immediately said, "No matter who the other party is, let's hide first. Given their strength, I'm afraid we won't be able to survive if they want to deal with us. Also, find a way to contact boss immediately and tell him what happened here." Alright. The other three nodded. Although they received orders to guard the cave and the immortal trove, they wouldn't sacrifice themselves in vain. Knowing that they were no match for the enemy, they wouldn't sacrifice themselves in vain. Since you've discovered us, don't even think about leaving. Wielding a spear, Jin Sijia appeared in front of the four men like a ghost. His cultivation had reached the late stage of foundation establishment and was only half a step away from breaking through to the golden core stage. He simply didn't put the four people from the Everlasting Feast Hall in his eyes. "It's you, Jin Sijia." Jin Shi was the name of the Everlasting Feast Hall's expert. His eyes stared fixedly at Jin Sijia as he shouted in a deep voice, "Our boss spared your life, but I never thought that you would dare to recklessly rob the immortal trove. Aren't you afraid that our boss will come back with a large team to kill you all? Had it been a few days ago, maybe I would have been worried." Jin Sijia sneered. "But now, since you're about to die, I don't feel like talking nonsense with you anymore. Just be a confused ghost in hell." He instantly unleashed the spear in his hand and manipulated it to stab Jin Shi. He didn't use his full strength, not even 80% of it, yet he confidently judged that these four guys couldn't dodge and would be killed by his spear. "Get into formation." Jin Shi was fearless in the face of danger. The moment his figure retreated, the other three also moved and formed the four symbols array nearly in an instant. Four flying swords hovered high in the air and rapidly rotated to smash the ordinary spear. Under the control of Jin Shi's group of four, they shrouded Jin Sijia. "What? That's impossible." Jin Sijia's complexion greatly changed and disbelief filled his eyes. He was an expert at the late stage of foundation establishment. Even if the weapon he used was not a magic weapon, it shouldn't be possible for him to be smashed in an instant, right? And this sword array. Damn it. These four guys have unexpectedly broken through to the foundation establishment stage. Jin Sijia cursed. He had a powerful physique, but now that he didn't have a handy weapon, he could only erupt his true essence to form an explosive fist light that fiercely collided with the rapidly rotating sword shadows. Beam. The sword array shattered and Jin Sijia's group of four spurted out blood as they were sent flying backward. Even if they had arranged a sword array with a power equivalent to the four people's attacks superimposed, it still couldn't resist Jin Sijia's powerful burst. However, the most miserable one was not them, but Jin Sijia. At this moment, Jin Sijia's right fist was smashed by the sword array, along with his forearm. Only half of his right arm remained. As for Jin Sijia's body, it was also shredded by the sword shadows, instantly turning him into a bloody man. "Impossible!" A heart-wrenching scream came out of Jin Sijia's mouth. His body violently retreated 100 meters, stepping on the void as he looked incredulously at his broken arm that was spraying blood. He couldn't figure out why the sword array could break his defense and give him such a heavy blow. Even if the four long swords were all magic weapons, they still couldn't do it, right? Jin Sijia's group of four instantly gathered together again. Their complexions were pale and the blood and qi inside their bodies were fluctuating, but they coldly stared at Jin Sijia with strong killing intent. In the distance, Daoist Qianquan, who was already fighting with Old Blind, didn't pay attention to the battle situation of Jin Sijia and Jin Shi's group of four. In his opinion, the four little guys who stayed here didn't have much ability at all. Since Jin Sijia wanted to kill them, it would be as easy as flipping his hand. But when he heard Jin Sijia scream and looked over there, his complexion suddenly changed and disbelief filled his eyes. He had a relatively good understanding of his disciples' cultivation. But never in his wildest dreams did he expect that his dignified late-stage foundation establishment disciple would be injured so badly and miserably by four ant-like existences. Boom! Taking advantage of the moment when Daoist Qianquan was distracted, Old Blind instantly released a golden silk thread that bound Taoist Qianquan almost in an instant. Bastard! Since you're courting death, then I'll fulfill your wish. Taoist Qianquan's most ferocious emotion was aroused. The move he just cast to counter Old Blind's picking stars and catching moon technique had already caused him to suffer some losses. But now, he couldn't care less. As the golden core inside his body was unleashed, 3 afterimages instantly separated from Taoist Qianquan's body. Last time, he was trapped by Old Blind because he was careless and didn't even have the time to use his final trump card before he was suppressed. But this time, he would not give Old Blind another chance. Since she was pestering him like a fly, then he might as well go all out and kill her. The 3 afterimages instantly arrived in front of Old Blind from 3 different directions. As the golden silk thread was cut off by the dagger floating next to him, the ping-pong ball-sized golden core burst out with a dazzling light and bombarded Old Blind's chest, while the 3 afterimages instantly blasted out hundreds of punches. Heaven's Secret, Big Dipper Stellar Transposition. Old Blind spread her 10 fingers and released golden fingers in all directions, instantly hitting the 3 afterimages of Taoist Qianquan. Half a second after she disappeared, she appeared hundreds of meters away, spurting blood from her mouth. Ha! Old Blind, I'll let you taste the killer move that I've just comprehended after decades of studying. Taoist Qianquan was pierced by the golden fingers, but the injury was not serious for him. Instead, his hideous and distorted face burst into a wild laughter as he fiercely pounced toward Old Blind. Old Blind furrowed her brows and once again used the Big Dipper's stellar transposition technique, instantly rushing toward the opposite mountain peak. In just a few seconds, she appeared behind Jin Sijie and shot out a Buddhist bead that instantly bombarded Jin Sijie's back. One hit. It made Jin Sijie's injury even worse. However, Old Blind didn't continue to attack Jin Sijie, but instantly appeared in front of Jin Shi's group of 4. She waved her arms and a stream of qi instantly wrapped around the 4 people's bodies as she shouted, "Don't struggle if you don't want to die. This Old Blind and Tan Xiu have met before, so I can't let you die here." The complexions of Jin Shi's group of 4 changed. They had just released their flying swords again when they suddenly heard Old Blind's words and immediately judged that she should be a friend and not an enemy. As the flying swords fell back into their hands, their surging true essence also calmed down a lot. "Let's go!" Old Blind stomped on the void and flew a kilometer away with Jin Shi's group of 4, coughing up another mouthful of blood. Despite her extremely fast speed, the continuous use of the Big Dipper's stellar transposition technique also made her injuries worsen. Chapter 660. 2 kilometers away. Jie Weili and his 2 trusted men were hiding behind a boulder on the mountain peak, observing the scene in midair in the distance through binoculars. He could clearly see the tragic battle scene between Taoist Qianquan and Old Blind. At this moment, despite being experienced and knowledgeable, Jie Weili was frightened by the scene. Was it a human? Was it a deity? Jie Weili didn't believe in ghosts and deities before. But the battle in midair was like a fight between immortals. It made him believe that there were still existences in this world that he didn't understand. At this moment he finally understood why Tan Xiu asked him to rush here to report the news and tell him that it was likely to be a life-or-death situation. Because what he had to face was not just ordinary people. Any one of those people could easily take his life. "Brother Jie, what's the situation?" His 2 men didn't carry binoculars, so they naturally couldn't see the battle just now. One of them stared at Jie Weili's frightened expression and asked in a low voice with a curious face. Jie Weili turned his head with difficulty. Looking at his curious men, he bitterly said, "I'm afraid we don't have to go. Even if we go, it won't have any effect. Besides, if we go, we'll just be throwing our lives away." "Then what should we do next?" asked the man quickly. Jie Weili was silent for a moment and then said in a low voice, "Wait. We'll wait here. Since Tan Xiu asked us to report in advance, it means that he'll also come here as soon as possible. We'll talk about it after he arrives," said the cave. Taoist Qianquan grabbed Jin Sijie's arm and put him on the ground, quickly checking his injury. Taoist Jianquan didn't chase after Old Blind because the trump card he just mentioned was simply a bluff. He was seriously injured. Although he was confident that his injury wasn't as serious as Old Blind's, if he continued to chase after them, it would trigger Old Blind's desperate counterattack. It was possible that he would perish together with Old Blind. He didn't want to die. Especially after learning about the existence of the immortal trove, he didn't want to die. He wanted to break through to the nascent soul realm and have a few hundred years of life. Blood gushed out from Taoist Jianquan's throat, but he swallowed it back. He pressed his hand on Jin Sijia's back and shouted in a hoarse voice. Jin Sijia was sneak attacked by Old Blind with the Buddhist beads, and his internal organs were shaken to the point of dislocation. At this critical moment, if he didn't seize the time to heal himself, his life would probably be in danger. Fortunately, he hadn't fully absorbed the healing elixir that Tan Xiu had given him. After sitting cross-legged on the ground, he was not in a hurry to cultivate. Instead, he said while breathing heavily, "Master, those 4 bastards. Their swords are definitely not magic tools. I suspect that they are all spirit tools. Otherwise, with their early-stage foundation establishment cultivation, even if they set up a sword array, they wouldn't be able to injure him so badly." Spirit tool? Taoist Jianquan was taken aback, and after a flash of greed, his face instantly became unsightly. He suddenly realized that if Tan Xiu's subordinate had a spirit weapon, then Tan Xiu's status must be even higher. What level was his weapon? In an instant, he grabbed Jin Sijia's arm again and shouted in a deep voice, "Don't cultivate yet. Let's leave this place immediately. We don't know when that surnamed Tang brat will return, so let's find a safe place first and then heal ourselves." The next morning, Tan Xiu, along with Mo Ao and 5 other experts, walked out of the Kana's airport's exit. The worried Tan Xiu didn't take a taxi, but quickly inquired about the nearby unlicensed cars. "Hey, friends, want to take a ride?" More than a dozen unlicensed cars were parked on the roadside. More than a dozen bearded and fierce-looking middle-aged men looked at the 6 people, and one of them called out, "I want 2 cars." "I'll buy them," said Tan Xiu in a deep voice. "State your price." The bearded middle-aged men looked at each other in dismay. They had been driving unlicensed cars here for more than a decade and had never encountered such a situation. The bearded middle-aged man who just called out hesitated for a moment before he stretched out a finger and said, "I'll sell you this van for 100,000 yuan. After Tan Xiu got off the plane, he had already planned to buy a temporary car. He even put hundreds of thousands of yuan in cash in his interspatial ring into a travel bag, which was now being carried by Mo Ao. Upon hearing the bearded middle-aged man's words, Tan Xiu nodded to Mo Ao. Mo Ao opened the zipper of the travel bag and took out 10 stacks of 100 yuan bills, totaling 100,000 yuan, and threw them to the bearded middle-aged man. "The key!" The bearded middle-aged man's pupils shrunk, while the other unlicensed car drivers in the surroundings also looked shocked. At this moment, the way they looked at Tan Xiu's group had changed. If Tan Xiu's group of 6 were not men and did not look like ordinary people, they would have thought of robbing them. "Here you go." The bearded middle-aged man was pleasantly surprised as he grabbed the 100,000 yuan. After recognizing that it was all real money, he happily handed the key to Mo Ao. His van was worth 40,000 to 50,000 yuan at most. Although it had just been a few months since he changed it and it had run less than 10,000 kilometers, it was still a big profit for him to sell it for 100,000 yuan. A few hours later, Mo Ao drove the van to Longquan Swamp. The group abandoned the van and quickly rushed toward the mountain range. It didn't take long for them to appear outside the cave where Western nefarious Sungha once lived. "Boss, there are traces of fighting here, and it should be left by cultivators." Mo Ao and the others checked the surroundings and directly reported to Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu's expression turned a bit ugly. He quickly entered the cave, but he didn't find the figures of Jin Shi's group of 4. Aside from the blood left outside the cave entrance, there was also the scene of the fight. It must be noted that Jin Shi's group of 4 were the core experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall, all of whom were personally raised and trained by Gu Yan. It would be a big loss for him and the Everlasting Feast Hall if all 4 of them were killed. "Damn Jin Sanchi, damn Jean Sijia. This father spared your lives because you didn't directly offend me. If I had known earlier that you had bad intentions, this father would have killed all of you. Tan Xiu was a bit annoyed. He found that he seemed to have become a lot more soft-hearted since he returned to Earth. Law. I'm affected by him, as well as my familial affection. But if I don't dig up the roots while cutting the weeds, there will be endless troubles in the future. I'll kill all enemies in the future. Tan Xiu's eyes were a bit red. After searching the 2 caves, he still couldn't find any trace of Jin Shi's group of 4. Someone's coming, boss. Just as Tan Xiu came out of the herb planting cave, Mo Ao whispered while holding a miniature telescope in his hand. Who are they? Asked Tan Xiu in a deep voice. They're a bit far away, but they should be ordinary people. Their speed isn't fast, said Mo Ao. No, I saw them. They're Jie Weili and his 2 men. They're rushing towards us. Tan Xiu's expression changed, and he instantly led Mo Ao and the others to greet Jie Weili. When he saw that Jie Weili's group of 3 looked a bit distressed but uninjured, he cupped his fists and said, Brother Jie, I can't thank you enough. I, Tan Xiu, will keep this matter in mind. I owe you a big favor. If you need me in the future, please don't hesitate to ask. Jie Weili's expression was a bit complicated as he stared at Tan Xiu. After a while, he forced a smile and said, Who exactly are you, Brother Tang? What do you want to ask? Asked Tan Xiu after a moment of silence. I saw the scene of them fighting last night, said Jie Weili. Those people are like the legendary immortals, flying in the sky to fight and kill. Their means are definitely not something ordinary humans can have. So, you should know what I want to ask, Brother Tang. You said you saw the scene last night? Asked Tan Xiu hurriedly. What exactly happened last night? Who was fighting with whom? Jie Weili didn't wait for Tan Xiu's reply, but he could see Tan Xiu's eagerness, so he suppressed his confusion and seriously said, I saw an old Taoist and an old lady fighting. I also saw an old man and 4 young men fighting. That's right, those 4 people were your men. What happened to them? Asked Tan Xiu hurriedly. What was the result of the fight? Asked Tan Xiu hastily. That old lady fled with your 4 men. That old Taoist and another old man stayed at the entrance of the cave for a while and then left. We were very far away, so I saw everything through a telescope, but I don't know where they went. Old Taoist? Old lady? Tan Xiu's brows deeply furrowed. He didn't expect that 2 people would suddenly appear. Furthermore, if the other old man was Jin Sanqi or Jin Sijia, it meant that his strength was inferior to the old Taoist if he attacked Jin Shi's group of 4. Tan Xiu pondered for a moment and asked again, Brother Jie, I'll answer your question later. Think about it carefully. Aside from my 4 men, what are the physical characteristics of the others? Thinking for a while, Jie Weili suddenly recalled something and quickly said, That old Taoist is very ordinary and has nothing special about him, but that old lady is blind. That's right. Though I don't know how she can see others, there's definitely something wrong with her eyes. Old blind? Tan Xiu suddenly recalled a person, the old blind man he once met in the Everlasting Feast Hall in Shanghai. Could it be that the one who saved Jin Shi's group was that old blind man? Tan Xiu took out a half-pack of cigarettes from his pocket, lit one and took 2 deep puffs. Then he looked at Jie Weili and said, Brother Jie, are you late? We're indeed late, said Jie Weili with a forced smile. We just arrived nearby and found people fighting. You didn't see it, Brother Tang, but the scene was simply... Brother Jie, you must never disclose the scene you saw last night, said Tan Xiu. Since you want to know our identity, then I won't hide it anymore. In fact, we're all cultivators who practice special cultivation techniques and have special abilities. However, people like us won't be exposed in the eyes of ordinary people. In order to celebrate the Great Union's sole unrivaled happy birthday, today's 3rd chapter will be released at the beginning of the month. I'm asking for a monthly ticket support. There should be a 4th chapter at around 11 p.m. Chapter 661. Jie Weili was no stranger to the term cultivator. He had never eaten pork, but he had seen pigs running. Nowadays, many TV dramas had cultivators. However, he was still shocked to learn that there were cultivators in reality. Can I cultivate, Brother Tang? Jie Weili had seen the means of Taoist Chen Old Blind, and the others, so he was particularly yearning for the scene of flying in the sky and wielding swords and blades. Everyone had a martial arts dream, not to mention that cultivation was more fantastical than martial arts, so he couldn't help but be tempted. You're too old, Tan Xiao shook his head and said, you're no longer suitable for cultivation. Even if you consume a lot of resources and time, I'm afraid you can only barely step on the threshold of cultivation for the rest of your life. Therefore, there's not much difference between cultivating and not cultivating. A regretful look appeared on Jie Weili's face as he slowly nodded and said, forget it then. What should we do next? Do we stay here? Tan Xiao pondered for a moment and said, let's go to Longquan Village. This place is not far from Longquan Village. Let's settle down first, and then I'll contact the blind old granny. Brother Jie, don't stay in Longquan Bay for a long time, because what I'm going to do next is very dangerous. Jie Weili forced a smile upon hearing this and said, I know myself. However, don't take risks easily. Quickly withdraw if there's danger. As the saying goes, where there's life, there's hope. There's still plenty of time in the future. If you want to clean up the enemy, you must strengthen yourself first. Don't worry. Tan Xiao nodded with a smile. Now that he learned that his 4 men had been rescued, he could finally put down his tensed heart. However, he still had to find Old Blind and Jin Shi as soon as possible. Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie were very powerful, and the mysterious old Taoist was not a good person. In the evening, Tan Xiao and the others rushed to Longquan Bay. After Jie Weili and the others left, Tan Xiao stayed at the locals' house and gave them some money to temporarily stay in another place for a few days. Boss, I found the things. Mo took a handful of incense sticks and entered the courtyard. Tan Xiao took out 3 sticks and lit them with a lighter. He looked around and shouted, Old Blind, Old Blind, Old Blind. In a mountain range dozens of kilometers away, an old blind woman with a face as pale as paper sat cross-legged beside a small stream. The water rushed past her, but she acted as if she didn't hear it. Her brows were tightly furrowed, and there was a pained expression between her brows. The corner of her mouth had not even dried yet. Around her, Jin Shi's group of 4 vigilantly observed the surroundings and set up a lot of traps. Although these traps posed no threat to martial cultivators, they could prevent the sneak attacks of ordinary wild beasts. They had already taken the healing panacea, so their injuries were no longer a problem. Old Blind suddenly opened her mouth and spurted out a mouthful of blood. As the stench quickly dissipated, her complexion turned a lot better. She slowly raised her arm and waved at Jin Shi, who was more than 10 meters away in front of her. Senior, you called for me? Jin Shi respectfully said. I didn't expect that the healing panacea you gave me would have such a good effect. Old Blind sighed. That old Taoist Chen severely injured me, so I thought I wouldn't be able to recover in a year and a half. But as it turned out, most of my internal injuries have healed in just half a day. We're out of danger for the time being, but you still have to tell me something. I need to calculate when Tan Xiao will come. What do you need to know, Senior? Jin Shi was confused. Old Blind let out a faint smile and was about to speak when her expression slightly moved. She looked up at the gradually darkening sky and slowly got up. She shook her head and smilingly said, No need to tell me. I already know where he is. Let's go. It shouldn't take much time if we rush there now. When Old Blind's group of 5 arrived at Longquan Village, the night had already shrouded the earth and a crescent moon hung high in the distant sky. A cold current surged, mixed with the aroma of food. In the most remote courtyard, there was an 8-person square table filled with appetizing dishes and 2 bottles of God's nectar that were taken out of the box. Looks like this Old Blind is in luck. A hazy silhouette floated into the courtyard and a satisfied laughter came out. After seeing Old Blind clearly, Tang Xiu's eyes just glanced at Jin Shi's group of 4 behind her and chuckled. He then took out 3 wine glasses and poured the God's nectar into them. Then, he picked up the glass and raised it to Old Blind, saying, I can't thank you with words, but my gratitude is all in this wine. Senior has saved my 4 brothers, and I will always remember this kindness in my heart. Tan Xiu promises again that 9 Dragons Island's door will always be open to you. Old Blind nodded with satisfaction. Despite her old age, she still showed a heroic spirit and drank all 3 glasses of wine in one breath. Then she sighed and said, "This is a peerless god's nectar." This old blind was able to taste such a fine wine in her life. Coming to this world is not in vain. "I'll always prepare it for you if you like it, Senior," said Tan Xiu with a smile. "Forget it." Old Blind waved her hand. "Wine is a poison that penetrates the intestines. This old blind still wants to live for a few more years, so you don't need to provide it to me, kid. Also, don't call me Senior or Senior. I'm not used to it. In the future, just call me Old Blind." Tan Xiu was a bit hesitant. "Don't mind the red tape." "It's decided," said Old Blind. "Let's eat first and then talk about Taoist Jiankuan." Taoist Jiankuan. Tan Xiu's expression moved. He beckoned Old Blind to take a seat and then accompanied her to finish the meal. As the dishes were taken away, the square table was also moved into the house. Then Tan Xiu said, Old Blind, you should talk about that Taoist Jiankuan now, right? What's his relationship with Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie?" Old Blind rubbed her belly and smilingly said, "They are master and disciple. Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie are Taoist Jiankuan's disciples." Tan Xiu's complexion slightly changed and asked again, "I've been here before and saw Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie. I spared their lives because of a moment of kindness. But that Taoist Jiankuan didn't appear at that time. He just broke my seal, so how could he have appeared before?" Old Blind sneered. "I won't hide it from you, Old Blind. In fact, I also have a grudge with him for many years. He was the one who coveted my family's inheritance, causing my father's death and killing my entire clan. Later on, I practiced the divination technique passed down in my family and spent many years of effort to finally arrange the starlight array in the abstruse ground to trap him there. I thought that it would be impossible for him to escape from the abstruse ground with his golden core stage cultivation, but I never thought that he would actually escape." Tan Xiu calmly pondered over Old Blind's words and then asked the question he was aware of in his heart. "According to what you said, that Taoist Jiankuan was not your opponent back then. How come you didn't defeat him last night?" "Back then, I used all my tricks and schemes to suppress him at the moment he lowered his guard," sighed Old Blind. "He didn't even use his trump card at that time, else I would have been the one killed back then." "Tan Xiu, do you know how many years that old Taoist has lived?" "Isn't he from the same era as you?" asked Tan Xiu in surprise. "He's at least twice as old as me." Old Blind shook her head. "Twice?" Tan Xiu's complexion slightly changed. He clearly remembered Old Blind's age, which should be about 120 years old. So to say, that Taoist Jiankuan was at least 240 years old? No wonder he's so powerful. "Old Blind man, even you aren't his match. What level has his cultivation reached now?" His cultivation had reached the late stage of golden core back then, and it's very likely that he would break through to the nascent soul stage in the future. But after being suppressed in the abstruse place for so many years, I found that his strength was much weaker than before when I saw him again. His power was only at the early stage of golden core. Otherwise, I would have been killed by him last night. Early stage of golden core? A cold light flashed in Tan Xiu's eyes. If Taoist Jiankuan's cultivation had reached the late stage of golden core, he wouldn't be able to contend with him even with his current strength. But he was at the early stage of golden core, and it shouldn't be a problem to kill him if he used some of his trump cards. "Old Blind, I need to know where that Taoist Jiankuan is now." Old Blind slightly furrowed her brows. Although her eyes couldn't see Tan Xiu, her special ability allowed her to clearly see Tan Xiu's expression. She shook her head and sighed. "It's very difficult to kill him with just these people you brought. Let's wait and see. We'll join hands to kill him when my injury is completely healed." "There's no need to wait," Tan Xiu confidently said. "I dare to find him now, so I have the ability to kill him. Tell me." Old Blind hesitated for a moment and then helplessly said, "I'll tell you since you've decided." He's in a place full of fiendish chi southwest of us. It's not far from here, probably within 50 kilometers. Southwest? Within 50 kilometers? Hunting ground? Tan Xiu's expression shifted. He immediately got up and said, "You stay here and recuperate, old blind. Wait for me to bring back the heads of Taoist Qiankuan and his 2 disciples. Let's go together." Old blind got up and said with a particularly firm tone, "Your injury." Tan Xiu hesitated. Old blind interrupted Tan Xiu and said, "Your subordinates gave me a holy healing medicine, so my injury has mostly healed now. But that Taoist Qiankuan's injury will be very painful if he doesn't have the holy healing medicine. Then let's go together." Tan Xiu could see old blind's firmness, so he no longer refuted. It was because when Jie Weili left with his men, he left them a Wrangler SUV. Together with the van, the 2 vehicles quickly rushed toward the hunting ground. Late at night, the cold wind whistled outside the window, but the dark room was as warm as spring. Taoist Qiankuan was quietly sitting cross-legged on the bed to recuperate, while in the next room, Jin Sanchi's eyes flashed with killing intent as he watched Jin Sijie recuperating in front of him. He hated old blind, Tan Xiu, and even Tan Xiu's men to the bone. Years of planning had finally fallen through. His master appeared, yet he still returned with serious injuries. This hatred made him secretly determined to find an opportunity to kill Tan Xiu, as well as those bastards who obstructed him from reaching the immortal Tao, begging for a guaranteed monthly vote at the beginning of the month. Chapter 662. In another 2-story Western-style building, Gesangger, dressed in loose training clothes, stood by the window with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes were unfocused, and it was obvious that he was thinking about something. Behind him, there were 2 lethargic old men with their heads lowered, their eyes looking down at their noses, as if they were 2 statues. "I need answers." Gesangger suddenly turned around and his eyes fell on the 2 old men as he spoke with a solemn tone. One of the old men slowly raised his head and rolled his eyelids, saying, "This is a big gamble. If we win, our Venom sect will have endless benefits, and if we lose, we'll be consigned to eternal damnation. You're our Venom sect's sect master, so we'll naturally follow all your decisions." Gesangger angrily said, "Fifth uncle, 6th uncle." Gesangger angrily said, "Both of you are the most senior members of our Venom sect and the only 8th-generation disciples who have survived until now. How can I arbitrarily decide such a big matter? We still haven't found out the details of that Tan Xiu yet. If he really has a terrifying force behind him, those old fogies can just pat their butts and leave, but we have our own sects, families, and businesses, so we can't retreat unscathed." "Then let's just wait and see," said the old man indifferently. "I have a feeling that this game between cultivators has just begun, and it's hard to tell who will win and who will lose in the end. That little you girl told me something a few days ago, and I think it's very reasonable." Gesangger's expression slightly shifted and he quickly asked, "What did she say?" "A red heart, 2 hands to prepare," said the old man. "You mean?" Gesangger stared blankly for a moment and was surprised. "That's right," said the old man. "Since our Venom sect doesn't have the qualifications to get involved, why don't we stay out of it and benefit from both sides? Those 8 sects in the Celestial Sect of Wonders staked everything on one throw and did their best to help Jin Sanchi and Jin Sijie. In the end, those 8 old fogies all died in battle, and many of their families' elites also died. But the result? I don't believe that Jin Sanchi and Jin Sijie would so easily pass on their cultivation arts to those 8 sections. I think you should send someone to secretly find Tan Xiu and pass the news that those 3 old Taoists are here. I think that with Tan Xiu's intelligence, he should be able to understand that we are trying to befriend him. If Tan Xiu wins the game between cultivators, we'll be able to obtain his friendship. If we pay a little more, we might be able to obtain some unexpected benefits. If Tan Xiu loses, it won't affect us." Gesangger's eyes sparkled as he gave a thumbs up and praised, "Fifth uncle, you're really astute." Just now, he was purposely keeping them in suspense. This idea couldn't be any better. "I'll send someone to contact Dunn later." Before he could finish his sentence, The headlights of the cars outside the hunting ground shone on the windows of the building they were in. The three of them quickly moved and looked out of the window. Who would come so late at night? Gesangjer frowned and muttered. The old man who had just spoken raised his eyebrows and said thoughtfully, "No matter what happens later, we can't step out of this room. Like I said, wait and see." "Do you mean Tanshio is coming, fifth uncle?" Gesangjer was surprised. "Just keep watching and you'll know," said the old man. Boom! The hunting grounds gate was smashed open by the Wrangler off-road vehicle and roared into the hunting ground. For security guards in the security room had just rushed out of the room when they were silently knocked out and dragged back to the security room. As the two cars stopped in front of the guest building, Tanshio and Old Blind got off together. Taoist Shenkuan, Jin Sanchi, and Jin Sijia. If you three master and disciples are not cowards, then get the fuck out here for this father. Else, I'll destroy this small building and let you eat a few mouthfuls of ashes. Tanshio grabbed the spirit spear and instantly released his spiritual sense, locking the three master and disciples in the two rooms. Bastards! The moment Taoist Shenkuan, who was recuperating, opened his eyes, he angrily destroyed the window and instantly appeared in front of Tanshio and the others. Jin Sanchi, Jin Sijia, and even the elites of the 8 forces of the strange doors also came out of the building and stood behind Taoist Shenkuan and his disciples. Tanshio sized up Taoist Shenkuan and sneered, "You're an old man who doesn't die. Taoist Shenkuan, you've lived for more than 200 years, yet you shamelessly schemed against my people. Are you tired of living?" Taoist Shenkuan squinted his eyes and scrutinized Tanshio. Then he slowly said, "You're Tanshio?" "That's right." Tanshio straightforwardly replied. Taoist Shenkuan shook his head as though he was looking at a dead man. His eyes then shifted to Old Blind and sighed, "Old Blind, it seems you've really become this little bastard's lackey. If it weren't for my disciple's injury, how could I have let you escape last night? You're courting death today, so don't blame this old Taoist for being ruthless." Old Blind was silent for a few seconds and then slowly said, "That brat Tanshio didn't listen to this Old Blind's advice and insisted on coming to seek revenge. Since I have something to ask of him in the future, I naturally can't just ignore it. If worst comes to worst, I'll give up my life here today and drag your soul to perish together with me." Tanshio slightly furrowed his brows and lightly said, "Old Blind, you're not allowed to act unless I can't hold on anymore." "Tanshio?" Old Blind shouted in a low voice. Tanshio waved his hand to interrupt her and said in a deep voice, "Shut up if you want to have a place to retire in the future. I know what I need to do." Having said that, Tanshio crazily poured his primal chaos force into the pitch-black spirit spear. After many days of refinement, Tanshio had completely refined this spirit spear. What made him pleasantly surprised was that this spirit spear was definitely a top-notch weapon. Even with his current cultivation, it was already very good for him to burst out 50% of the spear's power. Perishment chart, boundless spear array. Tanshio's body soared into the air as the spirit spear suddenly ignited with raging flames. Relying on the spear, Tanshio drew an array pattern in the air. After throwing the spirit spear into the air, the array instantly took shape and was activated in an instant. Within a radius of 100 meters, layers of illusory spear phantoms appeared. A surging airflow forced Old Blind, Mo, and the others to retreat dozens of steps, directly leaving the range of the spear array. Spear as the array, eye as the spring. Tanshio instantly appeared at the array's eye as a steady stream of primal chaos force crazily gushed out, instantly turning the radius of 100 meters into a raging sea of fire. An offensive array? Taoist Shenkuan's complexion greatly changed, while Jin Sanchi and Jin Sijia also looked horrified. It was not that the three of them, master and disciples, didn't know anything about arrays, but they knew very little about it. Never in their dreams had they ever thought that someone in this world could actually arrange such an array. In a flash, the world in front of the three of them, master and disciples, suddenly changed. Even the dozens of elites from the strange doors who were shrouded in the spear array suddenly found that the world in front of them seemed to have turned into an Azura hell. Fire snakes, fire birds, fire dragons, fire phoenixes, innumerable lifelike species, like real living beings, broke free from the underground magma one by one and roared as they pounced towards them. Layers of overlapping spear phantoms were like streams of light that constantly shuttled back and forth around them. A destructive aura descended from the heavens, and a formless pressure instantly enveloped them. A blood-curdling scream came from the mouth of an elite from the strange doors. A slender fire snake suddenly drilled out from the hot rock at the soles of his feet and slithered into his body through the sole of his foot. The intense pain made him feel like his soul was about to leave his body. But just as his scream sounded, all kinds of flame-spawned creatures pounced on him. They dismembered him and ate him. In just a few breaths, the elite from the strange doors was completely devoured. Not even a bone residue was left. The dozens of people from the strange doors around him were not much better than him. The number of flame-formed creatures was too many and they were quickly killed. Outside the array, even though the blind old lady could not see clearly, the image from the special dimension seemed to be reflected in her mind. Even though she was experienced and knowledgeable, she had never thought that one day she would actually see a living person struggling, screaming, and screaming. Suddenly, pieces of muscles, bones, and blood disappeared. In the end, the entire person disappeared. Mo'au and the other experts of the everlasting feast hall, as well as Gasanger and the two old men who were standing at the window in the distance and watching with military binoculars, all looked at the strange scene in horror. The feet were gone, the legs were gone, the head was gone, the arms were gone, and finally, the whole person was gone. Tan Xiao secretly sneered. Since these people from the strange doors wanted to team up with Taoist Qiankuan and his master and disciples, they would only be scourges in the future if they were kept alive. Thus, it was better to take advantage of this time and directly kill them to avoid future troubles. Taoist Qiankuan, Jin Sanqi, Jin Sijie, your henchmen are all dead now, leaving only the three of you, master and disciples. Enjoy it well. If the three of you can break this array, I'll let you taste the crueler means. Inside the array, Taoist Qiankuan didn't speak nor did he act rashly. He quietly observed the world inside the array and was extremely shocked inwardly. He had never seen such an array, even though his Grand Master had told him when he was very young that such an array existed in this world. The two brothers, Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie, also didn't act rashly. After all, both of them were over 100 years old and could be regarded as old monsters in the cultivation world. Who the hell are you, Tan Xiao? Finally, Jin Sanqi couldn't help but shout. He could hear Tan Xiao's voice, so he also thought that Tan Xiao could hear his voice. However, the moment his voice rang out, countless creatures formed from flames around him howled and lunged at him. Even the magma underground gushed out at this moment and blotted out the sky and earth as it rushed toward him. With a strange look in his eyes, Tan Xiao, who was inside the array, laughed aloud and said, "Who am I? I'm someone so powerful that you can't even imagine it. Since you're all going to die, you might as well go to hell and be muddled ghosts. I'm begging for a guaranteed monthly ticket at the beginning of the month. Thank you very much." Chapter 663. Jin Sanqi was a half-step into the golden core stage. Even though he was trapped by the array formation, he was still unfazed in the face of the unprecedented crisis. The true essence inside his body erupted and combined with the minor spells he knew, he constantly destroyed the flaming creatures that pounced on him. Layers of overlapping spear shadows were forcefully split apart by him. Your momentum is good, but your power is too weak. Jin Sanqi showed a bit of disdain and his counterattack increased again. At the same time, Jin Sijie also began to fight with those flaming creatures, narrowly avoiding the piercing and sweeping spear shadows several times. He didn't have an easy time dealing with them like Jin Sanqi. After all, he was now seriously injured. Even if there was residual holy healing medicine in his body, the effect was not particularly significant. Kill and destroy. But Jin Sijie's injury was getting more and more serious. Finally, the moment two flaming snakes wrapped around his ankles, A spear shadow pierced through his waist. Amidst his angry roar, the injury that pierced through his waist brought him a devastating blow. Countless flaming creatures and even more spear shadows followed. "Brother, avenge me!" Jin Sijia bled from his 7 orifices, but it immediately evaporated in the heatwave. His burly body finally fell to the magma at the side due to the heavy injuries. Although his body was as hard as iron, the magma still swallowed him up, leaving nothing behind. "Sijia!" When Jin Sanchi clearly heard his younger brother's roar, his heart felt like it had fallen into an ice cave. Anger and hatred twisted his face, and the destructive power that erupted from his every move swept away the flaming creatures in the surroundings. Even the dozens of spear shadows were kicked away by him and exploded into pieces dozens of meters away. Taoist Chen Kuan never moved and let many flaming creatures climb on his body. He stood there like a rock. He wasn't proficient in array formations, but he knew a bit about it. Through observation and inference, he found that as long as he didn't move or speak, those flaming creatures wouldn't take the initiative to attack him. Even the spear shadows that flew around seemed to have lost their target. However, his disciples' roar shook his heart violently. Finally, as his body shook, the flaming creatures crawling on his body exploded one after another, and a terrifying aura directly broke out. Everything within a radius of more than 10 meters was rolled up by the billowing airwaves and thrown to the distance before exploding into pieces. Break the array. Break the formation with brute force. Heaven and Earth Taoist worship power. He believed that in the face of absolute power, any obstacle could be violently destroyed. The golden core in his body was instantly taken out by him. The surging spiritual essence was like a torrential river, crashing violently into the void in front of him. Boom! The fiery world around them shook, and ripples appeared in the middle of the air. Faintly, terrifying cracks appeared. But in just an instant, the crack healed, and the ripples gradually subsided. Heaven and Earth Taoist's face was a little ugly. He had tried his best, but he still could not destroy the formation with pure power, which made him angry and unwilling. "I'd like to see how long this formation can last." Heaven and Earth Taoist spat out a mouthful of blood essence, and his Jindan, which was shrouded in a huge real essence, suddenly burst into a circle of true life fire. With the rising momentum, he once again bombarded the void in front of him. This time, the ripples in the surrounding air were even more intense, and the crack was slightly wider than before. However, the array formation still shook violently and recovered. Break, break, break. Again and again, the fiery world in front of him kept shaking, and the cracks in the ripple-like air kept increasing. As the number of bombardments increased, the fiery world seemed to be fragmented at any time, and the spear formation could be broken at any time. At the eye of the formation, Tan Xiu's face was a little ugly. Although he was desperately outputting his primal chaos force, Heaven and Earth Taoist's attack was too strong. Even if he tried his best to control it, the formation would still be broken. He steeled his heart and flipped his hand to take out 5 flame talismans and 4 lightning talismans, the only offensive talismans he had. "Kill!" His lips slightly opened and he uttered the word "kill." 5 flame talismans and 4 lightning talismans were under his control. Among them, 2 flame talismans and 1 lightning talisman appeared around Jin Sanchi and exploded in an instant, severely injuring him. The remaining 3 flame talismans and 3 lightning talismans instantly appeared around Heaven and Earth Taoist and formed a sea of fire that directly shrouded him, while dozens of lightning bolts instantly bombarded his body. Heaven and Earth Taoist spurted out a mouthful of blood again. He felt his internal organs being bombarded and displaced by the hard damage. The burning sensation made him suffocate, and his body was whipped by the electric current, leaving him badly bruised and badly mutilated. But at this moment, the fierceness in his heart was completely aroused. The incantation, under the guidance of his blood, was integrated into the Jindan. It was almost like he was fighting with his life on the line, fiercely and violently. Crack! The spear formation shattered like glass and collapsed in the blink of an eye. Tan Xiu, who was at the eye of the formation, suddenly trembled. The backlash of the formation caused him to spurt out a mouthful of blood. Had it not been for his extremely strong physique, the backlash would have been enough to make him explode and die. However, such injuries were nothing out of the ordinary for him in the past. His figure flashed in an extremely calm state, and he instantly flashed past Jin Sanchi, who was covered in wounds and had a dull expression on his face. Puff! The blood-guzzler dagger burst out with a dazzling light and a head was instantly sent flying. Jin Sanchi, who was only half a step away from breaking through to the golden core stage, stared at the spinning world with eyes as wide as saucers. He looked at his headless body as blood spurted out from his neck. 100 meters away, Old Blind's divine sense had been shrouding that area, allowing her to clearly see the scene of the fight. When the array was broken and Tan Xiu brazenly killed Jin Sanchi, she was shocked to the point that it was hard for her to recover from the shock even though she was experienced and knowledgeable. Jin Sanchi's strength was obviously slightly stronger than Jin Sijia's. She had seen Jin Sijia's strength before. Tan Xiu was still very young. Even if he relied on the array, it was impossible for him to kill Jin Sijia and Jin Sanchi, right? At the same time, Mo, Jin Shi, and the others were shocked. They looked at Tan Xiu with fanatical eyes, almost shouting, "Long live!" Tan Xiu's performance impressed them. Inside the small building in the distance, Gesangjer and the two old men were dumbfounded, as if they had seen the most incredible thing in the world. Jin Sijia was dead? Jin Sanchi was also dead? The remaining dozens of elites from the 8 sects of the Celestial Sect of Wonders were also dead? Gesangjer suddenly rejoiced that he was not involved in this matter. Otherwise he, the 2 elders, and even the entire Poison Sect's disciples would have died without a burial place. At the same time, he also felt a bit regretful. If Tan Xiu and the others had come a bit later, he could have sold them a favor. Tan Xiu's attack was very fast and the timing he seized was also very ingenious. Even Taoist Qianquan couldn't react when Jin Sanchi was directly beheaded. At this moment, despite having experienced countless storms and waves in his life, Taoist Qianquan was still so heartbroken that he almost burst into tears. The 2 disciples he had received in his life, who almost stepped into the Golden Core realm, were killed just like that. This was undoubtedly like a sharp knife that fiercely stabbed into his heart. "I'm going to kill you!" Taoist Qianquan roared. Although the luster of the Golden Core had become extremely dim and its body had shrunk, it still fiercely bombarded towards Tan Xiu under Taoist Qianquan's control. It would be difficult to vent the hatred in his heart if he didn't kill this brat. He no longer cared about how much damage he would suffer if he continued to fight. There was only one crazy thought in his mind: to kill Tan Xiu and avenge his disciples. "You still need to cultivate for hundreds of years to kill me." Tan Xiu laughed loudly as his figure rushed towards the bombarding Golden Core like a sharp arrow. The vigorous primal chaos force in his body crazily poured into his arm and fiercely bombarded the Golden Core. 100 meters away, Old Blind's complexion drastically changed and he shouted with a horrified expression, "Don't!" Boom! Tan Xiu violently retreated dozens of steps back before he coughed up a mouthful of blood and staggered to stabilize his body. Despite his incomparably strong physique, the bones in his fingers were still broken and his whole fist was badly mutilated. The moment he stopped, the spirit spear he had put away shot straight toward Taoist Qianquan and instantly pierced his chest. How is this possible? Taoist Qianquan's 7 orifices bled and he looked down at the hole in his chest with difficulty. His golden core was blasted by Tan Xiu's punch, and the backlash made his injury severe to the extreme. The wound on his chest was directly hit by a direct hit to his heart, causing his vitality to constantly flow away. Cough. Tan Xiu's complexion was a bit pale. After coughing up 2 mouthfuls of blood, he looked up at Taoist Qianquan and sneered, "I may not be as good as you in terms of our cultivation. However, I specialize in body refinement, so my physique is more than 10 times stronger than yours. Remember my words, Taoist Qianquan. Don't be my enemy in your next life." "Is there a next life?" Taoist Qianquan murmured. As soon as he finished speaking, his body crashed to the ground, and he had already breathed his last. Tan Xiu couldn't deny it. He turned his head and saw that Old Blind, Emo, and the others had arrived quickly. He immediately shook his wrist and lightly smiled. "I'm fine. It's just a minor injury. Killing them, master and disciple, did cost me a lot of means. But now that they've been eliminated, I don't have to worry about them anymore." "How can you be so strong, Tan Xiu?" Old Blind murmured. "That old Taoist is a golden core expert and an old freak who has lived for 200 or 300 years. You're so young and you haven't been cultivating for a long time, have you?" "There's nothing impossible in this world," said Tan Xiu with a light smile. "Taoist Qinkuan and his 2 disciples may have high cultivation, but their fighting means are very poor. Even if I didn't fight him head-on, I still have countless means to kill him. It's just that it will take more effort." Old Blind fell into silence. She couldn't see through Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu slowly looked up and looked at the small building in the distance. Then, he said in a clear voice, "Gesangjer, as the owner of this hunting ground, shouldn't you come out to greet the guests? Begging for the minimum monthly vote support at the beginning of this month." Chapter 664. Inside the 2-story building, Gesangjer's breathing stagnated. When he turned to look at the 2 old men beside him, he found that both of them nodded to him at the same time. After a while, Gesangjer and the 2 old men appeared in front of Tan Xiu and the others. Looking at the corpses on the ground, Gesangjer wryly smiled with a complex expression and said, "I didn't expect that you're also a cultivator, Mr. Tang, nor did I expect that you have such a powerful strength. It seems that my previous worries were groundless." "I didn't expect that Master Gesangjer would turn out to be someone from the strange doors," said Tan Xiu lightly. "Your status should be quite high, right? I'm the sect master of the Venom sect, but I've never participated in the disputes of other forces. We've never provoked anyone while staying in Khanas all these years. Mr. Tang, if you're dissatisfied with the people from the strange doors, please don't direct your anger at our Venom sect. Taoist Qinkuan, Jin Sanqi, and Jin Sijie insisted on staying here, but I don't have the guts nor the ability to drive them away. The crime of shielding is also one of the criminal laws in today's society," said Tan Xiu with a faint smile. "Please forgive me, Mr. Tang, but how can you not stoop to our level?" Gesangjer spread out his hands. "It's easy for me not to stoop to your level," said Tan Xiu with a faint smile. "I'm very dissatisfied with the forces from the strange doors that Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie have won over. I won't pursue your responsibility if you can make up for your mistakes and eliminate all those people from those forces." Gesangjer's expression moved and he suddenly cupped his fists and said, "Gesangjer is willing to serve Mr. Tang." "Serve? Not to make up for my mistakes?" Tan Xiu's mind raced and he immediately saw through Gesangjer's thoughts. He let out a faint smile and slowly stretched out 3 fingers, saying, 3 years. If your Venom sect's performance satisfies me within 3 years, I don't mind letting you go further." "The probation period?" Gesangjer's eyes lit up and he respectfully said with a bit of excitement, "I, Gesangjer, and the entire Venom sect behind me will always serve you, Mr. Tang. No matter what orders you have, as long as it is within our capabilities, we will definitely do our best to accomplish it." A smile outlined on the corner of Tan Xiu's mouth as he nodded and said, "Then let's kill all the people from the strange doors involved in this incident first. He's Moo. I'll have him stay behind with a few people to assist you. 10 days later, I hope that everyone from those forces will go to hell." "Yes." Gesangjer did not know the strength of Moo and the others, but since they could follow Tan Xiu, they must also be cultivators. With the help of several cultivators, it would be a piece of cake to uproot the 8 families. Subsequently, Tan Xiu was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he stayed in the hunting ground to heal his wounds. Although his injuries weren't too serious, they weren't light either. Especially the backlash caused by the spear array being broken, his entire internal organs were burning with pain. If he didn't treat his injuries soon, it might leave behind hidden dangers. Noon of the next day. When Tan Xiu came out of the room, Mo told him that Old Blind had left. Before leaving, he told Mo to tell him that he would come to Shanghai's Everlasting Feast Hall in June. Our venom sect is ready, boss. At lunchtime, Gesangjer arrived in a hurry. Since you're ready, then let's get started, said Tan Xiu. Remember, don't leave any hidden dangers behind, and don't make too much noise. After all, it's a new society now. Gesangjer nodded cautiously. In fact, he knew what to do even without Tan Xiu's instruction. He didn't dare to kill the people of the 8 families with great fanfare in the current situation where the media was very well informed. His venom sect was adept at assassinating people with poison and killing them in an invisible manner. Boss, I've figured it out. Those 8 Strange Doors clans are very powerful. What should we do after killing them? Asked Jinshi all of a sudden. Tan Xiu looked at Jinshi with a strange expression. He suddenly grinned and said, "Oh, I think Jinshi is a good guy. He's very quick-witted. I think we'll leave this matter to him. You go back with me." Mo was very brave, but he was a bit lacking when it came to considering things. Upon hearing Jinshi's words, he realized that he wouldn't be able to solve the subsequent problems. Hence, he let out a hollow laugh and nodded without saying anything. Jinshi, contact my grandpa personally if this matter involves the officialdom. I think he can solve it, continued Tan Xiu. If it involves the business sector, contact Kong Xia personally and she'll take care of it. Remember, those who should be killed must be killed. Don't be soft-hearted. I understand. Jinshi respectfully replied. In the evening, Tan Xiu arrived at Jie Weili's horse farm in Kanas. After seeing Jie Weili coming out to greet him, Tan Xiu got off the car and smilingly said, "Brother Jie, I'll be freeloading dinner here tonight." "You're most welcome," said Jie Weili with a clear and loud laugh. Tan Xiu nodded with a smile and said while walking, "I've troubled Brother Jie this time to run to the deep mountains and forests, so I can't express my gratitude verbally. After dinner, I'll give you a big gift. Just take it as my thanks to you." "Brother Tang, you don't need to be so polite since we're friends," said Jie Weili with a straight face. "I, Jie Weili, fancy you as a person, not your money, wealth, and things." Tan Xiu shook his head and smilingly said, "The gift I'm giving you is something that money and wealth can't buy." "Alright, don't decline it. Let's finish dinner first." "Alright, I'll send someone to prepare it now." Jie Weili was a bit expectant and excited. He already knew that Tan Xiu was a cultivator, so he felt that the gift Tan Xiu gave him was something that countless ordinary people could only dream of. Sure enough, after dinner, Tan Xiu taught him a simple qi-nourishing cultivation technique. This cultivation technique couldn't make ordinary people become cultivators, but it could prolong their lifespan and strengthen their physique. Furthermore, this cultivation technique was very easy to cultivate. Tan Xiu even wrote a prescription for Jie Weili, telling him to take the medicinal herbs according to the prescription and take the medicated diet. After doing all this, Tan Xiu took Mo and left the horse farm amidst Jie Weili's gratitude and quickly rushed to the airport. What made him helpless was that the Kanas airport had stopped all flights due to the weather. Tan Xiu didn't want to waste time here, so he took a bus with Mo and rushed to the Beijiang railway station overnight. "All the train tickets are sold out, boss." Mo came out from the ticket booth with a helpless expression. The new year had just passed, and it was the peak period for students to go out to study and workers to work. "It's 2 a.m. now, so it seems we can only leave this place and find a hotel nearby to stay. We'll leave tomorrow morning," said Tan Xiu. Mo nodded silently. Suddenly, his eyes flashed and he hurriedly said, "Boss, maybe I have a way to buy train tickets. Please wait a moment." Tan Xiu watched Mo leave quickly and secretly whispered to several youngsters in the corner a dozen meters away. Then he handed out some money and returned with 2 train tickets. "It's a ticket scalper, boss. We need to transfer to Ning Province." After the bumpy train ride, Tan Xiu and Mo rushed to Ning Province. It was already evening by the time they arrived. Fortunately, they bought a sleeper, so they didn't feel tired at all. Afterward, they rushed to the Ning Province airport without stopping. After buying the tickets, they smoothly boarded the plane to Shanghai. Strange, why is there no one? After they boarded the plane, Tan Xiu and Mo were surprised that there were no passengers on this flight. The entire cabin was empty except for the 4 stewardesses. "Sir, this flight has been cancelled due to the weather. But due to the change in the weather, this problem has been lifted, so the passengers who originally booked this flight have refunded their tickets. You bought it at the last minute, so there are only a few passengers on this flight. Please wait for a moment. There's still half an hour before our flight takes off, so there should be more passengers coming later," replied one of the beautiful stewardesses. Tan Xiu suddenly understood. After sitting down according to the ticket number, he quietly waited. "Sir, there are many passengers here. I don't like to sit near the window. Can we change seats?" A sweet-sounding voice sounded as a voluptuous masked woman stood in the aisle next to Mo and asked, "Change seats." Mo slightly furrowed his brows and quickly glanced at the cabin environment. What made him secretly vigilant was that there were only 5 passengers in the entire cabin, including the woman next to him. Tan Xiu, who was sitting near the window with his eyes closed, also heard the voice. He opened his eyes and looked around and also found this problem. "I'll find a seat at the back." Tan Xiu glanced at the masked woman and calmly said, "All right." Mo replied and quickly went to the back seat. Tan Xiu calmly watched the masked woman sit down and also smelled the feminine fragrance coming from her. He lightly smiled and said, "Miss Shui, it's a small world. This saying really does have some truth to it." Shui Yu's eyes curved and a smile appeared on her face as she said, "It's the ancestor who told me that you'll take this flight to Shanghai. It just so happens that I'm also going to Shanghai to find my fiancé, so we happen to meet here. What's wrong? Mr. Tang doesn't want me to sit next to you?" "Your fiancé?" asked Tan Xiu. "Chu Yuan." "Actually, I've already seen my fiancé." Shui Yu shook her head. But Tan Xiu was surprised. "He's far away, yet right in front of you. Mr. Tang, do you really not know? Or are you deliberately playing dumb?" Tan Xiu raised his finger to point at his nose and incredulously said, "You mean me? Is there anyone else in front of me besides you?" asked Shui Yu with a smile. Tan Xiu rolled his eyes and snappily said, "Miss Shui, you can eat whatever you want, but don't speak irresponsibly. I already have a family, so it's no fun for us to crack such jokes." Shui Yu shook her head and said, "If I didn't know your true identity, I wouldn't be sure that you're the first man to see my true face. Mr. Tang? No, I should call you Tan Xiu to sound more intimate. Tan Xiu, am I right? In fact, you've already seen what I look like in Star City." Chapter 665. Tan Xiu frowned and was silent for several seconds before he slowly asked, "Who's your ancestor?" Shui Yu gently raised her hand and lifted the veil covering her face. Her devastatingly beautiful face appeared before Tan Xiu's eyes as she chuckled and said, "My ancestor is a blind woman who was born in the Miao region just like me. She knows about the past and present and can even divine the path of life." Tan Xiu stared blankly and asked in astonishment, "Doesn't this blind woman have no children and no relatives?" "The reason why we call her ancestor is not because we're related by blood." Shui Yu shook her head and smilingly said, "Our ancestor is destined to bring bad luck to her husband and relatives, so she naturally has no children. But she's the guardian deity of our Miao region and the oldest senior in our tribe. That's why all the tribes in the Miao region address her as ancestor." Tan Xiu suddenly understood. He raised his hand to touch his nose and helplessly said, "Your ancestor listens to my orders, so shouldn't you also listen to mine?" A crafty glint flashed in Shui Yu's eyes as she smilingly said, "Except for the ancestral rule that cannot be changed, I'll listen to everything else. There's an old saying in our Miao region that if you marry a chicken, follow the chicken. You'll be my husband from now on, and I'll do whatever you want me to do." Tan Xiu felt like he was stuck by a piece of gummy candy and quickly said, "Rules are dead, but people are alive. The rules passed down by the ancestors need to be broken by the later generations. Miss Shui, I really have a girlfriend, and we have a very good relationship. I don't think you want to be a third party with your qualifications, right? That's why I think Chu Yuan is the most suitable for you." "Chu Yuan is not suitable for me." Shui Yu shook her head. Having said that, She slowly took out a small porcelain bottle and poured out a black pill from it. Then, she said again, according to our tribe's rules, I only have two choices if you don't want to accept me. First, I can kill you. Second, I can commit suicide. Ever since I learned your identity, I've realized that I can't kill you. So, there's only one option left for me now, suicide. Tan Xiu frowned and said, if you want to die, then commit suicide. Shui Yu's eyes darkened. Her slender fingers pinched the black pill, and she directly put it into her mouth. At that moment, she slowly closed her eyes. Tan Xiu was dumbfounded. He'd already identified the effect of the black pill through its smell, and it was absolutely a highly toxic medicine. Not to mention an ordinary person, even a cultivator with a low cultivation would die upon consuming it. Bang! Tan Xiu's palm patted Shui Yu's chest. Although the softness made him feel very elastic, he did not have the slightest evil thought at all. As the chaotic force entered Shui Yu's body, it controlled the black pill that was about to melt in just half a second. The moment he pinched Shui Yu's cheek, the black pill flew out of her mouth. Stupid! Tan Xiu scolded with a cold face. Shui Yu opened her eyes again, but they were still as lifeless as before. She shook her head and said, you can save me once, but you can't save me forever. Only death awaits me unless you promise to marry me. Tan Xiu fell into silence. After releasing Shui Yu's cheek, he thought for a few minutes and then slowly said, since I can't make you change your clan's rules, then Old Blind should be able to do it, right? You call her ancestor, so you should listen to her words. Before I came here, Ancestor personally told me that I need a benefactor's help in the future to live normally, said Shui Yu. The benefactor she mentioned is you. Also, Ancestor asked me to tell you that she won't appear again even if you burn 3 sticks of incense and shout her name. If you want to see her again, you can only wait until next June at the Everlasting Feast Hall in Shanghai. This Old Blind. Tan Xiu was exasperated. He didn't expect that Old Blind had already predicted that he would look for her and unexpectedly blocked his path ahead of time. Suddenly, his expression moved and he lightly said, I already have a girlfriend. It's impossible for me to abandon her and marry you. Since you're crying and shouting for me to accept you, then it's not impossible. You'll be my lover from now on. Or should I say, a mistress? Shui Yu stared blankly for a moment. An angry and ashamed expression flashed in her eyes. She was silent for a long while before she nodded with an ugly expression and said, Then I'll be your lover. We don't have a legally recognized marriage certificate between us, but you must find some time to go back to the Miao region with me and hold a marriage ceremony with me. You want me to be a mistress or a mistress? Tan Xiu angrily said, You agree to be a mistress? Is your brain fried or something? It's better to live than to die, said Shui Yu honestly. I'm still young and I don't want to die. Besides, it's not like polygamy and polygamous tribes don't exist in our Miao region. In ancient times, there was also the rule of having 3 wives and 4 concubines, which I can accept. Fuck! Tan Xiu was truly speechless and completely defeated by Shui Yu's reasoning. He had seen the problem of having 3 wives and 4 concubines many times. Back in the immortal world, countless immortal world powerhouses had countless immortal companions and immortal concubines. Even for ordinary people in those empires, the emperors had 3 palaces and 6 courtyards and 72 concubines, while countless princes and nobles had groups of wives and concubines. Men in some countries even used the number of women they had as proof of their ability. But this was Earth. Furthermore, this was the new era of the 21st century. How could such a feudal mentality be so terrible that even a woman like Shui Yu couldn't avoid it? After the plane took off, Tan Xiu turned his head to look at Shui Yu and said, I don't care what you think. But since you want to be my lover, then don't affect my normal life. I still want to live the life of an ordinary person, so our relationship can't be known by others. I'll give you a house when we arrive in Shanghai, and you can live there later. You can't look for me unless I take the initiative to look for you. Of course, if you think it through and want to leave me, you can leave me directly. You don't even need to call me. No problem. Shui Yu nodded. Tang Xiu still wanted to earnestly persuade her, But when he saw her cold expression, he immediately lost the mood to do so. He didn't want to talk to her, so he directly closed his eyes and slept. At the Shanghai airport. When Tan Xiu came out of the airport with Mo Ao and Shui Yu, Qinan had already received a call from Mo Ao and had been waiting outside for a long time. "It's been hard on you, boss." Qinan's face was glowing. She looked several years younger than the first time Tan Xiu saw her. Now, she looked to be in her late 20s at most. Her appearance was even more beautiful than before, and her figure was also more outstanding than before. "Not bad. It seems that you've gotten a lot of cultivation resources." Tan Xiu nodded and said, "But don't take too many elixirs. You still need to be down to earth in your cultivation and lay a solid foundation. Else, it'll be very easy for you to suffer from qi deviation if your cultivation level rises too fast." Qinan's complexion changed and she immediately replied with a solemn expression, "Understood. This subordinate will keep it in mind." Tan Xiu didn't speak again and followed Qinan to the parking lot outside. He then boarded the car and went straight to the Blue Star Villa complex. After Qinan left, he looked at Shui Yu, who followed him and lightly said, "There are many guest rooms on the first floor. You can choose one to stay in. I'll take you to your new residence tomorrow." "I want to live with you," asked Shui Yu. "The number of times we've met is less than 5 fingers, said Tan Xiu with a dissatisfied expression. "Do you think it's appropriate to live with me now? Even if we're lovers, there must be a gradual process to slowly cultivate feelings, right? Since we're lovers, desire should be more important than feelings." Shui Yu shook her head. "Also, I won't feel at ease if you don't want my body." "Nonsense." Tan Xiu didn't have the slightest desire, so how could he want Shui Yu's body now? He reprimanded her in a low voice and turned to walk to the second floor. As for Mo Ao, although it was his first time here, he seemed to be familiar with the place and quickly found a room. On the second floor. When Tan Xiu walked into his bedroom and saw Shui Yu following him, he was at a loss whether he had to cry or laugh. "Hey, Jade Beauty, you don't have to be so persistent, do you? Can't you just give me a break? A few days? Just a few days. You women have a few days of discomfort every month, but we men also need to take a break. You should have heard it from your swindling ancestor, right? This trip to Kana's is absolutely a narrow escape from death. It's not easy for me to recuperate and come back. Can't you just let me take a break?" Shui Yu hesitated for a moment before she took a few steps back and left the room. Then she directly pushed the opposite door and went inside. Bam! The door was closed and Tan Xiu walked to the bed with a helpless expression. He directly lay down on it and cursed inwardly, "What a dog-skin plaster living ancestor. It seems like I'm affected by the heavenly Tao here. Could it be that I was hurt by love in the immortal world, so I came back to Earth to compensate me? Otherwise, there shouldn't be so many love tribulations." Tan Xiu recalled the scene when he was in the immortal world. For thousands of years, apart from Shui Qingqing, he had never found any other woman who liked him. Logically speaking, he had an illustrious status in the immortal world with a terrifying cultivation base. Didn't they say that beauties loved heroes? Why didn't he do so at that time? He was not sure. In fact, he did not consider this aspect when he was in the immortal world, especially after he had Shui Qingqing. His whole heart was on Shui Qingqing, and other women simply could not enter his eyes. How could he know that when he was in the immortal world, there were more than hundreds of millions of women who adored him? But when he returned to Earth, because of his mother, he had to consider the relationship between men and women. He had to consider marrying a wife and having children. Otherwise, he was afraid that his mother would be angry and sad. On this night, Tang Xiu didn't cultivate. Even though his injuries had healed, he was still quite tired after running around and tossing around all day long. He took a simple bath and changed into clean clothes. Just as he was about to go to bed, someone knocked on the door again, and Shui Yu's sweet voice came from outside the door. "Tan Xiu, I need a change of clothes." Chapter 666. After the fragrant medicated diet was carried into the dining room by Shui Yu, Tan Xiu's appetite was immediately stirred. He could clearly feel the spiritual energy contained in the medicated diet, which indicated that she had added a lot of medicinal herbs to it. "Did you buy it this morning?" asked Tan Xiu in astonishment as he felt his whole body warm after drinking a bowl of medicated diet. "I once lived in Shanghai for some time, so I know a Chinese medicine store that opens early," said Shuiyu. "I originally had some money left, but I spent all of it buying medicinal herbs." "These medicinal herbs are not cheap, are they?" asked Tan Xiu. "It's not that much." Shuiyu nodded and said, "I bought 12 million yuan worth of medicinal herbs, but it can only be used to make a medicated diet for half a month. Such a small pot of medicated diet is only a few 100,000 yuan. Clang! In the corridor outside the dining room, the flower pot was accidentally knocked over by Zhang Xinlan. She didn't mean to eavesdrop on the conversation between Tan Xiu and Shuiyu, but the content nearly made her drop her jaw. Tan Xiu hurried out of the dining room and saw Zhang Xinlan's flustered and frightened appearance. He instantly understood that she had heard Shuiyu's words. He forced a smile inwardly and quickly comforted her. "Are you all right, Aunt Zhang? You can throw this flower pot away after it's broken. You must get treatment quickly if you're injured." Looking at Tan Xiu's amiable and approachable appearance, Zhang Xinlan's restless heart eased a lot. She shook her head and said, "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Tang. I'm fine. I'll go out and buy an identical flower pot. Don't worry, I'll pay for it myself." "You don't need to pay for it yourself, Aunt Zhang." Tan Xiu waved his hand and smilingly said, "Just deduct it from my living expenses. Don't treat yourself as an outsider if you want to work here in the future." Zhang Xinlan gratefully looked at Tan Xiu and hurriedly took the tools to clean up. Just as she was about to clean up and watch Shuiyu go to the kitchen to wash the dishes, she quietly came to Tan Xiu's side and hesitantly said, "Mr. Tang, I know you're very rich, but you should save as much money as you can. Isn't the money you saved?" Tan Xiu couldn't help laughing. He could guess the reason why Zhang Xinlan said that from the way she stealthily glanced at the kitchen several times. He immediately said with a smile, "Aunt Zhang, Shuiyu used to be very rich, at least in the hundreds of millions. She might have been used to spending lavishly in the past, so she couldn't change her character in a short time. But don't worry. I will definitely educate her well in the future and guarantee that she will become a good wife and mother." "A good wife and loving mother type of lover," Zhang Xinlan muttered in her heart, but she still nodded in relief. She was just a nanny, so she had a sense of propriety. Today, reminding Tan Xiu was the best she could do. Soon after, Tan Xiu went out with Shuiyu and went to the nearby shopping mall to buy a lot of clothes and daily necessities. Then he drove to the most prosperous Binjiang Avenue in Shanghai and entered the once top luxury villa residential area in the country. Thompson Villa. The interior decoration of the double-story duplex villa was extremely luxurious, with all kinds of household appliances. The villa was regularly cleaned by the property's cleaning staff every week. When Tan Xiu opened the door with the key, he found that the inside was unexpectedly spotless and everything was neatly arranged. "This place is good. You're the man who has invested the most in his lover." Shuiyu walked around the villa and found that she was very satisfied with this nearly 200 square meter mansion, be it the floor or the view from the window. Tan Xiu forced a wry smile and said, "Don't be sarcastic, okay? I don't have many properties in Shanghai, and the other one is a bit far from the downtown area, so I can only let you live here. If you have a better place, you can choose to move away." Shuiyu raised her brows and said, "Why would I move away from the mansion my man gave me? You can treat me as a canary and treat me as a good wife and a loving mother later." Tan Xiu didn't want to discuss this issue with Shuiyu, so he waved and said, "All right, you can live here later. I still have to rush to campus, so I can't accompany you. Just call me directly if there's anything you need." "All right." Shuiyu gently nodded. After leaving the Thompson Villa complex, Tan Xiu hurried to Shanghai University. It had been a few days since the start of the semester, yet he hadn't appeared on campus. Han Qingwu had called him several times during this period, expressing her dissatisfaction. Today was Thursday. Although he didn't have any classes in the morning, he still had to rush to campus to see Han Qingwu. He also had to call his dormitory brothers at noon. Since the luxury sedan was left to Shuiyu, he took a taxi to the gate of Shanghai University and saw several luxury supercars driving inside. Not only did the security guards at the gate not stop them, but they also saluted them with smiles on their faces. Which family's second-generation silk pants are they from? Tan Xiao sighed inwardly and walked inside. Along the way, many students greeted Tan Xiao, while Tan Xiao also responded to them one by one. He was, after all, a celebrity at Shanghai University, and nearly all the teachers and students knew him. Han Qingwu, I, Song Zizong, love you. Marry me. I promise I'll love you with all my heart. I'll love you forever and ever. The loudspeaker was placed on a yellow supercar with a handsome young man holding a bouquet of roses standing next to it. Nearby, there was also a young man in front of 3 other supercars. Each of them was hugging a graceful girl, smiling as they watched the courtship scene. Tan Xiao's pace came to a halt. He looked up at the teaching building in front of him and a smile outlined on the corner of his mouth. He really wanted to tell the courtship young man not to be blind to Han Qingwu. But when he thought that the second-generation silk pants was not a good person, he immediately dispelled the idea. Originally, he was anxious to go to the teacher's office in the teaching building to cancel his leave with Han Qingwu. But when he saw such a wonderful courtship scene, he immediately dismissed the idea. Instead, he walked to the big tree at the side and leaned there with his arms crossed, looking at Han Qingwu running out of the building with a faint smile. At this moment, Han Qingwu was wearing jeans, a white goose-down coat, and a coffee-colored scarf around her neck. However, her expression was very angry, and her eyes seemed to be able to spit fire. She ran to the young man holding a large bouquet of roses and scolded him, Song Zizong, are you done yet? You came to my house to make trouble, and now you even came to my campus to make trouble. Do you believe that I won't call the police? With a sincere expression, Song Zizong directly knelt on one knee in front of Han Qingwu and swiftly took out a heart-shaped red box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal the sparkling diamond ring that was at least 2 carats and said, Qingwu, I've really fallen in love with you. I've been deeply attracted by your graceful bearing ever since you drove away those 7 thugs in front of me. I swear that I love you with all my heart. Please give me a chance. I'll definitely make you happy. Marry me. I'm sorry. Han Qingwu coldly refused. You're just a pretty boy with powdered hair and a powdered face in my eyes. You don't have any masculinity at all. You can't give me any sense of security, and I don't have any feelings for you either. If you're done, then quickly get the hell out of Shanghai University. I won't give up. No matter how much time, power, money, or action I have to spend, I'll pursue you, said Song Zizong seriously. Feelings need to be cultivated, and I firmly believe that my efforts will make you open your heart. Sooner or later, you'll be able to accept me. Han Qingwu was exasperated. She raised her fist at Song Zizong's handsome face, but she didn't punch it. After thinking for several seconds, she suddenly said, It's fine if you want to pursue me, but don't use this kind of despicable means to court me. I'll give you a chance if you promise me a few conditions. Song Zizong's eyes lit up and hurriedly asked, What conditions? Let alone a few conditions, I'll agree even if you have thousands of conditions. First, don't bother me in the near future, said Han Qingwu. Unless you can train your muscles to the point that you can knock down several thugs by yourself. We'll talk about the second condition after you've fulfilled the first condition. Song Zizong stared blankly for a moment before his face immediately pulled down. He raised his arm and forced a smile, saying, I have the confidence to train my muscles, but to knock down several thugs, isn't that too difficult? I've never practiced martial arts before, and even if I were to practice it again now, it won't have much effect even after a year or so. Forget it if you don't agree, sneered Han Qingwu. Song Zizong's complexion turned blue and white. After a long while, he gritted his teeth and said, I agree, but I'll still come to you every few days. You're the one I love deeply, and I can't sleep or eat well if I can't see you. Also, I have to guarantee that other men won't take advantage of this. Also, if that Tan Xiao in your class really dares to provoke you, I'll cripple him. What does this have to do with Tan Xiao? shouted Han Qingwu angrily. Get the hell out of here. Hatred and jealousy flashed in Song Zizong's eyes as he said, I know that Tan Xiu is very famous, and you're quite close to him. But you're the woman I love, and I won't let him off if he dares to have any bad thoughts. Fuck off, snapped Han Qingwu. Not far away. Tan Xiu was at a loss whether he had to cry or laugh as he looked at Song Zizong. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that the scene where he was supposed to woo Han Qingwu would suddenly involve him. However, he didn't take Song Zizong's threat to heart at all. Before figuring out the cause and effect of Xue Qingqing's betrayal, he would never have the slightest relationship with Han Qingwu. On the other hand, once bitten by a snake, twice shy. He also didn't feel like entangling with this woman. As long as Song Zizong didn't have a screw loose and really find trouble with him, he would also be too lazy to care about him. After all, he didn't care about a boy without the strength to trust a chicken even if his family background was better. A few minutes later, for supercars left, Tan Xiu looked at Han Qingwu, whose face was faintly pale with anger. He put down his arm and walked over with a playful expression as he caught up with Han Qingwu's departing figure. You're quite popular, Teacher Han. You even have a lot of pursuers chasing you to school. Chapter 667. Han Qingwu turned to look at Tan Xiu. The expression on her face was particularly splendid. There was astonishment, joy, shame, anger, and grievance. Finally, those emotions turned into gnashing her teeth. She grabbed Tan Xiu's arm and forcefully twisted Tan Xiu's waist. Ouch! Even though Tan Xiu didn't feel much pain, he still pretended to cry out in an exaggerated manner. Seeing that Han Qingwu let go of his hand with satisfaction, he let out an embarrassed smile and said, Teacher Han, what's that dude's origin? He actually drove his car to the front of the teaching building to woo you? It's very difficult for an average person to do something like that. He's a scoundrel, relying on. Han Qingwu indignantly said, Forget it. You won't know it even if I tell you. Anyways, let's change the topic. Don't blame me for deducting your credits if you skip classes for no reason again starting today. Tan Xiu stared blankly for a moment and immediately said, Didn't we have an agreement before? I'll take you to Jingmen Island for a tour. You can ask for a leave at any time if I have something important to do later. Han Qingwu rolled her eyes at him and snorted, That was before the new year. I can't indulge you anymore after this year. Besides, you still have the nerve to say that you'll take me for a tour? You left me alone in Jingmen Island, and I don't know where you ran off to. I haven't even found you to settle the account until now. Tan Xiu was a bit helpless. He had an important matter to deal with in Jingmen Island. For the sake of the two islands in the South China Sea, he had gone all out to kill the fierce beasts and the Yao family. However, it was inconvenient for him to tell this to Han Qingwu, so he could only force a smile and said, How about we talk about it? If I really have something to do, I'll ask for a leave from you. For example, I'm going to hold a very important bidding meeting in Shanghai a few days later, and I'm afraid I'll be delayed for 2 days. Bidding meeting? What bidding meeting? Han Qingwu looked confused. I recently ordered my men to buy a large piece of land in a remote area of Shanghai, said Tan Xiu. I'm preparing to build the magnificent Tang Corporation's HQ as well as an industrial park belonging to the company. In a few days, almost all of the top 20 large construction companies in the country will come here to bid. You want to move the magnificent Tang Corporation's HQ to Shanghai? Han Qingwu was surprised. That's right. Shanghai is an international metropolis and the best gateway to the world. Tan Xiu nodded. If the magnificent Tang Corp's products were to be sold abroad in the future, it would be better to set up its headquarters in Shanghai. Teacher Han, I must personally participate in such an important matter. If you don't approve my leave, I'm afraid I can only skip classes. You can't bear to see me get expelled from Shanghai University for skipping too many classes, right? Han Qingwu hesitated for a moment before she coldly snorted and said, Remember to write me a leave slip when the time comes and hand it to me personally. Tan Xiu was overjoyed and immediately flattered. Teacher Han is so understanding and reasonable. I haven't seen you for a winter break, but I've noticed that you've become younger and more beautiful than before. Get lost. A smile finally appeared on Han Qingwu's face as she gave Tan Xiao a coquettish, supercilious look. After some exchanges, one of Tan Xiao's purposes for returning to campus had been achieved, so he immediately bade farewell and rushed to the boys' dormitory. On the way there, he called Yu Kai and learned that he, Hu Qingsong, and Zhao Liang were out shopping. It seemed that only Xue Chao was in the dormitory. 10 minutes later, just as Tan Xiao arrived at the dormitory, he saw Xue Chao running out of the door with a big envelope in his hand. He directly stuffed it into Tan Xiao's hand after seeing him. "This is?" asked Tan Xiao in surprise. "This is your money," said Xue Chao with a simple and honest smile. "My wife and I have been working in the Everlasting Feast Hall for half a year and earned a lot of money. Especially during the Chinese New Year, Chief Qi gave us a big red envelope each, enough for us to live for some time." Tan Xiao shot a deep look at Xue Chao and casually stuffed the envelope into his pocket. He put his arm around his shoulder and walked toward the campus gate while saying, "I know you don't want to owe me too much. But since you're willing to pay me back, then I'll accept it. We're classmates and brothers. I'll be happy if you have money later, but you can tell me if you don't." "Brother." Xue Chao's heart warmed after hearing Tan Xiao's words. He nodded and asked, "Where are we going?" "Let's go eat," said Tan Xiao with a smile. At the entrance of Shanghai University, 4 luxury supercars were parked at the side. Song Zitsong, with a cigarette dangling from his mouth, looked bored as he watched his 3 bad friends hugging a girl and talking about love. He came from an extraordinary background and was the only heir of the Huaxiang group in China. He lived a life of luxury since childhood, living like a crown prince. However, ever since he stepped into puberty, his rebellious nature caused him to be obsessed with martial arts. He even went through various channels to find a lot of powerful masters to become an expert. Unfortunately, his short-lived enthusiasm made him spend a lot of money, but he didn't learn much of his skills. Last year, he followed his parents to Shanghai to handle some affairs and went out alone to find some scoundrel friends in Shanghai for a gathering. As a result, he had a quarrel with a local hooligan and was eventually chased by the hooligan for a long time. Fortunately, he met Han Qingwu, a woman who had a beautiful appearance but was powerful enough to make him worship her. He still clearly remembered the scene at that time. Han Qingwu's delicate body burst out with terrifying power and speed. She was simply like a tiger entering a flock of sheep. In just a few seconds, a group of hooligans with steel pipes were all beaten down by her. Each and every one of them lay on the ground crying for their parents, looking very miserable. At that moment, Han Qingwu's graceful bearing was deeply engraved in his heart, completely making him worship her under her skirt. Therefore, he didn't try his best to figure out Han Qingwu's identity and her social relations, nor did he pursue her at all costs. It was a pity that the king of Xiang was interested, but the goddess was heartless. No matter how he tried to woo her, Han Qingwu always showed a distant expression and even rejected him many times. Tan Xiao. This was a person he had investigated when he was investigating Han Qingwu. He was once the top scorer in the college entrance examination in Shuangqing province and was also a former student of Han Qingwu. When Tan Xiao came to Shanghai University, Han Qingwu also transferred directly to Shanghai University. He even asked someone to find Tan Xiao's classmates to inquire about the relationship between Han Qingwu and Tan Xiao. The result made him very worried because the news he heard was that Han Qingwu liked Tan Xiao. The reason why she came to Shanghai University was to pursue Tan Xiao. "That brat is here, young Master Song." Suddenly, a whistle sounded from the side. A handsome young man with a girl in his arms pointed to the direction of Shanghai University's gate. Song Zitsong looked over there and immediately saw the person he was waiting for. Almost in the blink of an eye, he walked over there and stopped him, asking in a deep voice, "Are you Tan Xiao? Han Qingwu's student?" Tan Xiao slightly furrowed his brows. He didn't expect that Song Zitsong didn't leave and instead came here to wait for him. Although he didn't know why Song Zitsong was targeting him, he was sure that it was definitely related to Han Qingwu. "That's right, it's me." Tan Xiao gave Xue Chao a reassuring look and calmly replied, "Since it's you, then let's make a deal," sneered Song Zitsong. I'll give you 1 million, and you'll never pester Han Qingwu again. Also, I'll add another 1 million if you're willing to drop out and disappear from Shanghai. How about it? Tan Xiu hated Song Zitsong's overbearing attitude, but he didn't even have the desire to beat this rich second generation who didn't know the immensity of the heavens and earth. He bypassed Song Zitsong and didn't feel like dealing with him anymore. Stop right there, surname Tang? Song Zitsong angrily shouted. Tan Xiu slightly furrowed his brows. He turned around and indifferently said, I want to know something. Do you have no confidence in yourself? Or do you want to play dirty tricks? I'll tell you in advance that I'm not short of money. Maybe your father's money is not as much as mine. Yo. There's actually such a crazy guy in Shanghai University? Do you know how much money young Master Song's family has? Do you know how many listed companies young Master Song's father controls? Most importantly, do you know who his father is? Pa. A young man pushed away the girl in his arms and walked over with a cigarette in his mouth. Who are you? asked Tan Xiu. The young man coughed and casually tidied his clothes. He then smilingly said, I'm a local bully in Shanghai, and there are only a handful of people I don't know among the rich second generation and the second generation of officials. Don't laugh. I'm not trying to scare you. I just want you to be afraid and back off. Then, my friend from the other side won't have to deal with you. The less trouble, the better. Or you. Tan Xiu sneered. Tang Xiu sneered, a local bully? What's your name? Song Zitsong sneered and interjected, You haven't even heard of him, yet you still dare to touch a woman like Han Qingwu? You're really courting death. Do you know the Xinjiang Group? He's the future successor of the Xinjiang Group, Zhang Zitao. The Xinjiang Group? A strange expression appeared on Tan Xiu's face as he looked at the young man and asked, Are you Zhang Yueming's son? The smile on Zhang Zitao's face froze. He slightly furrowed his brows and said, You're not qualified to mention my father's name. I'll spare you this time, but I'll make you regret it if you dare to say it again in front of me. Tan Xiu suddenly smiled. His smile was particularly bright, making Zhang Zitao baffled. He looked at Tan Xiu as he took out his mobile and dialed a number. What a poser! Zhang Zitao rolled his eyes. He folded his arms and leaned on the luxury supercar behind him, looking like he was watching a play. Tan Xiu dialed Zhang Yueming's cell phone and immediately turned on the loudspeaker. The phone rang a few times before Zhang Yueming's hearty laughter came out. Brother Tang, have you returned to Shanghai? Gu Changmin told me a few days ago that he's waiting for you to come back so that he can hold a welcoming dinner for you. Zhang Zitao's expression instantly froze. His mouth slightly opened and an incredulous look appeared on his face. He was more familiar with his father's voice than anyone else. Tan Xiu looked at Zhang Zitao with a faint smile and then said in a neither fast nor slow manner, Zhang Yueming, someone just told me that I'll regret it if I dare to say this name. Since when did you become so powerful that you don't even let people mention your name? Chapter 668. At the Xinjiang Group. Zhang Yueming left the boss's chair and walked to the window to talk. Upon hearing Tan Xiu's words, he stared blankly for a moment before he couldn't help laughing and said, You must be joking, Brother Tang. I would have become the president of the United Nations if I had such great ability. Who's the one gossiping about me? How dare I make such a joke in front of you? Tan Xiu noticed that Zhang Zitao gulped down a mouthful of saliva. The smile on his face turned a bit thicker as he said, Who else dares to gossip about me other than your precious son? Even if you and Brother Gu want to hold a welcoming dinner for me, I don't dare to go, and I can't go either. Your son is now blocking me at the gate of Shanghai University with his hardcore brother. He's the local tyrant of Shanghai, threatening me and wanting to clean me up. I'm really scared now. Zhang Yueming's expression instantly turned extremely marvelous. Threatening Tan Xiu? Cleaning up Tan Xiu? Zhang Yueming recalled the various means Tan Xiu used in the past. A chill instantly rushed up his spine. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that his son would provoke Tan Xiu one day. It's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. Brother Tang, If that little bastard is disrespectful to you, you can slap him hard and let him know that his elders need to be respected. Just wait for me, I'll rush over now. Hearing the tension in Zhang Yueming's voice, Tan Xiu immediately said with a smile, "You don't need to come over, Brother Zhang. Your precious son is listening by your side. How about you talk to him on the phone?" "This might as well." Zhang Yueming hesitated for a moment before finally replying. With a frightened look on his face, Zhang Zitao cautiously looked at Tan Xiu. Before taking the mobile phone from Tan Xiu's hand, he first bowed to Tan Xiu in public. Then, he took the phone and said with a bitter expression, "I'm sorry, Dad. Although I heard Song Zizong mention the name Tan Xiu before, I didn't think he was the Tang. Uncle Tang that you always talk about. If I knew it was him, even if I was given 100 guts, I wouldn't dare to meddle in other people's business." When Zhang Yueming heard his son's voice, he immediately cursed, "You good for nothing. Even if it's not Brother Tang, you can't just casually bully others. Your wings have hardened, haven't they? You dare to run amok now? When you apologize to your Uncle Tang, your attitude must be sincere, and it must come from your heart. You scoundrel, you don't learn anything good from day to night. You're just fooling around with your pack of scoundrels. Wait and see how I'll deal with you later." Zhang Zitao's expression was ugly. He wasn't afraid of anything except the old man at home. He was right. Although he had heard Song Zizong mention Tan Xiu's name a few times before, he had never thought of this man in front of him. In the past 6 months, the name that he had heard the most from his father's mouth was this lord's name. "Dad, I will apologize immediately." Zhang Zitao didn't hang up the phone. Instead, he took it and bowed to Tan Xiu again, saying, "Uncle Tang, I didn't expect that I would be so disrespectful to you. You are a magnanimous person. The Prime Minister is magnanimous, so don't lower yourself to my level. I know I'm wrong. You can beat me if you want to vent your anger." At the side, Song Zizong was shocked by this sudden change. He was tongue-tied and dumbfounded as he watched the 180-degree reversal of the plot. His heartbeat sped up and he felt that his bones were a bit cold. He was crystal clear about the Zhang family's strength. It was a very powerful force in Shanghai. How could Zhang Zitao suddenly turn into a docile little sheep in front of Tan Xiu? There was also Zhang Yueming. His words were full of worry, as if this guy in front of him was a great figure. Could it be that he also has a powerful background? Even a big shot like Zhang Yueming was afraid of him? Upon thinking up to there, Song Zizong immediately regretted it. He should have investigated Tan Xiu's background before coming here. Tan Xiu looked at Zhang Zitao, who was sincerely apologizing. The words, "Uncle Tang," echoed in his mind. He was not as old as this Zhang Zitao in front of him, right? He was actually a generation older than him? Tan Xiu slowly raised his hand and looked at Zhang Zitao's pale face. Then he gently patted his shoulder and lightly said, "A lot of rich second generations and officials' children don't know how to keep a low profile and are immature enough. As a result, they bring disaster to their family and implicate the whole family. You should be more careful in the future. You're already so old, so it's time for you to mature. Alright, let's end this matter here." After saying that, he took back his mobile and smilingly said, "Brother Zhang, it's said that a tiger father won't beget a dog son. I believe your son will have great achievements in the future. But in terms of education, you'll have to put more effort into it." Zhang Yueming, who had just taken the mobile, had already heard his son's apology and Tan Xiu's words. He let out a hollow laugh and helplessly said, "Brother Tang, it's all my fault for being negligent. There have been too many business matters in recent years, so I haven't disciplined this child Zitao a lot. But you can rest assured that I'll discipline him well in the future. I'll strive to make him mature as soon as possible so that he can take over my position and let me relax for a few more years." Tan Xiu laughed. "I'll look for Brother Gu to have a meal with you later." After hanging up the phone, Tan Xiu looked at Song Zizong. At this moment he found that Song Zizong lowered his head and didn't speak. Then he shook his head and said, "You're Song Zizong, right? I don't care who your father is, nor do I care how powerful your family is. Just remember my words. If you really like a woman, then use your sincerity to move her and melt her with your love. Using threats to deal with someone you think is your rival in love is simply stupid. Get lost and don't be an eyesore in front of me. Song Zitsong raised his head and wanted to say something, but he swallowed back the words he wanted to say after seeing the indifferent expression on Tan Xiu's face. Although their Song family was stronger than the Zhang family, he felt that what Tan Xiu just said was right. Don't court disaster for your family and don't implicate the whole family. After all, he still hadn't figured out his identity yet. Not far away, the other two young men who were hugging the girls were completely dumbfounded at this moment. They didn't even notice Song Zitsong and Zhang Zitao coming over. As for the three girls, their eyes lit up as they looked at Tan Xiu with eyes full of curiosity and worship. Let's go! Zhang Zitao's heart was filled with a haze. He immediately shouted in a low voice upon seeing the dull look on his two friends. He had long wanted to get to know Tan Xiu, but he never had the chance. Now that he finally met him, he offended Tan Xiu, which made him curse Song Zitsong 100 times in his heart. As the four luxury supercars left, Tan Xiu patted the dumbfounded Xue Chao next to him and said with a smile, I say, if we don't go to the restaurant, I reckon you Kai and the others will starve to death. Xue Chao came back to his senses and said with worship on his face, You're too awesome, big bro Tang. You actually managed to subdue a few arrogant fellows who drove luxurious cars. Zhang Zitao, are you really his uncle? But how come he doesn't know you? Tan Xiu couldn't help laughing and said, Let's make an analogy. How would you address your dad's friend if you met him? Uncle or uncle, of course, replied Xue Chao. That's it. Tan Xiu nodded. Zhang Zitao's father and I are brothers, so what do you think his son should call me? Xue Chao patted the back of his head and awkwardly said, Look at my pig brain. I can't even think of such a simple question. Come on, let's go eat. At Auspicious Restaurant. It was an ordinary restaurant near the University of Monster Science and Technology. It didn't have any special dishes, but there were two advantages that many students of the university liked. The portion was large and the price was affordable. Yu Kai and the others often visited this place when Tan Xiu was not around. When Tan Xiu and Xue Chao arrived, they found that Yu Kai and Hu Qingsong had not arrived yet. After thinking for a while, they called Mu Weining and learned that she had just finished her class and was about to go to the cafeteria with her dorm sisters for a meal. Quickly, Yu Kai, Hu Qingsong and Zhao Liang came from the outside, while Mu Weining and her three dorm sisters also came together. After some laughter, the fragrant dishes were eaten by everyone, leaving only leftovers. Everyone returned to campus since they had classes in the afternoon. We'll go to the classroom first. The mischievous Jiang Fian winked at Mu Weining and then playfully looked at Tan Xiu before pulling Li Xinjie and Hu Wei away. Yu Kai, Hu Qingsong, and the others also whistled and walked toward the teaching building. Mu Weining had been worried about Tan Xiu. Now that she saw him safely coming to Shanghai, she finally felt relieved. Now that there were only the two of them left, Mu Weining gently pulled Tan Xiu's arm and asked in a low voice, Have you solved the matter in the West? Tan Xiu nodded and said, Don't worry. It's all settled. Mu Weining hesitated for a moment before asking in a low voice, I want to go to the company tomorrow. Do you want to go with me? Tan Xiu saw the expectation in Mu Weining's eyes. He hesitated for a moment before nodding and said, Let's go together then. Tomorrow happens to be Saturday, so there's no class. Mu Weining looked happy and the smile on her face turned thicker. She chatted with Tan Xiu for a while and then left in a hurry. When Tan Xiu came to the classroom, Yu Kai and the others naturally teased him for a long time. The two classes in the afternoon ended in a very relaxed state. Tan Xiu didn't go back to the dormitory with Yu Kai and the others. Instead, he directly left campus and returned to the Blue Star Villa complex. During the afternoon class, he received a text message from Moo. He learned that the power generator had been transported to Shanghai and was now moved to the villa in the Blue Star Villa complex. Generating electricity to temper his body was a method that Tan Xiu had thought about, but he had yet to test it until now. Now, he urgently needed to try it. If it was effective, it would definitely become an important subject for him to train his subordinates. However, to Tan Xiu's surprise, he saw a very unexpected guest before he even entered the house. Even after seeing him, Tan Xiu faintly felt a headache. He really didn't want to see this person if he could. Chapter 669. As the saying goes, don't slap a smiling face. Tan Xiu looked at Chu Yuan, who greeted him with a smiling face. He felt somewhat helpless inwardly, especially since Shuiyu followed him to Shanghai. Chu Yuan was obviously interested in Shuiyu, so he didn't want to see him. However, driving him away would be inexcusable. Mr. Chu, it seems you have investigated me very clearly. Tan Xiu didn't show his thoughts on his face and said indifferently. Chu Yuan had been waiting here for 10 minutes, but the two big men didn't let him enter the door, so he could only stay outside. Now that Tan Xiu had arrived, he smilingly said, "You misunderstood me, Mr. Tang. I just learned that you're studying in Shanghai, so I wanted to visit you. It's not appropriate to go to the campus rashly, so I asked someone to check your residence." Tan Xiu nodded and led Chu Yuan inside. He ordered Auntie Zhang to make tea and then sat down in the reception room. As the cigarette was lit, Tan Xiu calmly asked, "I just returned to Shanghai yesterday, yet you came to visit me today. Is there something urgent?" Just as Chu Yuan was about to speak, the reception room's door was pushed open. Mo came in and glanced at him before he quickly came to Tan Xiu's side. He took the cigarette and whispered in Tan Xiu's ear, "The power unit has been assembled and can be used at any time, boss." "Got it. I'll be there later," said Tan Xiu. Mo nodded and left the reception room straight away. Tan Xiu took a puff and lightly smiled. "I'm sorry. My subordinate has something to tell me. Please continue." "I know we haven't known each other for a long time, Mr. Tang, and the number of times we've met is pitifully few, but I really want to make friends with you. My father has taught me since I was a child that one is marked by the company one keeps. Being friends with capable people will bring me a lot of pressure, but it can also make me constantly improve." Having said that, he took out something wrapped in yellow satin cloth from his pocket. He got up and put it on the tea table in front of Tan Xiu and said again, "This is a small object I've collected for many years. It's a small gift for you, Mr. Tang." Tan Xiu squinted his eyes and said with a faint smile, "According to Mr. Chu's identity and status, this little gift is probably not simple, right? As the saying goes, don't accept rewards without pains. If you're still hiding your true intentions, I don't think we can be friends. Instead, we'll have some conflicts." Chu Yuan stared blankly for a moment before he forced a wry smile and said, "It seems that Mr. Tang has seen through my thoughts. That's right, I came here for 3 main reasons. First, I sincerely hope that I can be friends with Mr. Tang. We live in a society of human relationships, and the more friends we have, the more options we have. Second, I have heard of some changes that have happened in the strange doors. These changes seem to be related to Mr. Tang. I want to protect a person. She used to teach me for a period of time. She can be considered as half a master to me." Tan Xiu raised his eyebrows and asked, "Who?" "Ling Long Ches Saintus," answered Chu Yuan. Tan Xiu's expression turned cold as he shook his head and said, "If you don't dig up the roots when you cut the weeds, you'll have endless troubles in the future. Though I'm very curious as to why she left the Kana's hunting ground and didn't die in my hands, she's still an enemy. Let me ask you something, Chu Yuan. If someone uprooted the Imperial Garden and killed all your relatives, would you be able to let go of this blood feud?" Chu Yuan stared blankly for a moment before he bitterly shook his head and sighed. "Since you've put it this way, I'm afraid I'll be ungrateful if I'm still entangled in this issue. She's going to die, and I'm not your opponent, so I can only do something within my power, such as the old, weak, and young of her family." Tan Xiu looked at Chu Yuan's probing eyes and indifferently said, "You must know what's more important if you don't want to stir up trouble. I don't care if the Imperial Garden is the Tai of the 3 styles or the 6th style, but it's best not to meddle in this matter. Of course, I'm not that unreasonable. It's good for the surviving members of the 8 families to be ordinary people." Chu Yuan shot a deep look at Tan Xiu and said with a straight face, "I understand. Tell me your third purpose," said Tan Xiu. "I heard that Mr. Tang came to Shanghai with Jade Beauty? asked Chu Yuan. Hee hee, Tan Xiao suddenly grinned. He stood up and walked toward the door of the reception room. While walking, he said, "The Imperial Garden has been in Shanghai for so many years. You really have a deep foundation and many eyes and ears. Such a trivial matter can't escape your eyes. Since you've come here, you should have found that Shui Yu's veil is gone, right?" Chu Yuan's heart trembled and a sense of oppression grew inside. Although he had seen the photos of Tan Xiao and Shui Yu leaving the airport and was deeply attracted by Shui Yu's stunning appearance, it was just a guess and he didn't dare to be 100% sure that it was Shui Yu. But, now that he got confirmation from Tan Xiao, he knew that he didn't have a chance. Even if Tan Xiao didn't want Jade Beauty, it was likely that she would never be with him again given her character and the rules of her clan. His heart ached faintly, but he felt powerless about this result. Following behind Tan Xiao, he suddenly said with a slightly pale face, "Mr. Tang, you should be very clear about my feelings. Jade Beauty and I have known each other since childhood and can be regarded as childhood sweethearts. But since she has made her choice, I respect her decision. I just hope that you'll treat her better in the future." Just as Tan Xiao was about to enter the hall, his footsteps suddenly came to a halt. He turned to look at Chu Yuan with a slightly unwilling expression and said with a light smile, "Shui Yu is nothing in my eyes. I wanted to drive her away and stop her from pestering me, but I failed. If you can convince Shui Yu to leave me and never see me again, maybe I can accept your friendship." What? Chu Yuan was shocked and a sense of shame involuntarily arose inside him. The woman he wanted to pursue turned out to be so unimportant in the eyes of others? He was proud and conceited, but he was a bit disheartened at the moment because of a woman. "I'm sorry, but I don't have the ability." Chu Yuan took a deep breath and said with a bitter face. Tan Xiao shook his head and turned back to continue walking, saying, "I still have something to do, so I can't send you off, Mr. Chu. I believe you already know where Shui Yu lives, Mr. Chu. You can find her at any time if you want to see her later." Having said that, he passed through the living room and came to the front of a door in the opposite corridor. After pushing the door open, he saw that everything else in the room had been cleaned out, except for the power unit installed inside. 2 arm-thick wires were connected and sealed with a plastic seal. Chu Yuan didn't leave despite hearing Tan Xiao's order to leave. He followed to the door and was immediately stunned when he saw the scene inside. After hesitating for a moment, he still followed inside. "You're still not leaving?" Tan Xiao took off his coat and turned to look at Chu Yuan. Chu Yuan spread out his hands and forced a smile. "Mr. Tang, you haven't seen the gift I gave you. I guarantee you'll like it." A trace of surprise was revealed on Tan Xiao's face. He was silent for a moment and then said, "Since it's a good thing, then I'll see it later. Do you see this thing? It's the world's most powerful power unit, up to 1.2 million kilowatts. The core equipment of this unit, the boiler, the steam turbine, and the generator, are all the best in the world. Do you know what I'm going to use it for?" "I don't know," Chu Yuan shook his head, confused. "I'm not a clean freak, but I also like cleanliness." Tan Xiao said with a smile. "Using water to bathe is too boring, and I'm afraid it won't be clean. Do you think it'll be cool to use electricity to bathe?" Using electricity to bathe? "Mr. Tang, you must be joking," said Chu Yuan with a smile. "Anyone who can use electricity to bathe is simply an immortal." Tan Xiao shook his head and quickly took off his clothes, leaving only his underwear. Then, he nodded to Mo Au in the room. Along with the start of the power unit, the 2 thick wires thrown on the ground slightly vibrated. Tan Xiao grabbed the ends of the 2 wires and removed the plastic seal on them. Suddenly, he felt the violent electric current energy escaping. "Boss, 10,000 volts. Activate the strongest electric current state." Mo Au looked at the number on the display and said in a deep voice. Tan Xiao nodded and directly inserted the 2 thick wires into his chest. The violent electric current directly drilled into his body at this moment. What made Tan Xiao slightly furrow his brows was that the strongest electric current state of 10,000 volts only made his body slightly numb. His fingers and toes were a bit painful, as though they were bitten by ants at the same time. Hiss! Chu Yuan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He was very clear about the power and electric current issues. Once the strongest electric current state was connected to a human body, it would definitely be instantly electrocuted. However, when the electric current hit Tan Xiu's body, he turned out to be, as if nothing happened to him. Double it. Tan Xiu said without changing his expression. Chu Yuan's heart trembled and he instantly revealed a horrified expression. Even though he was experienced and knowledgeable, he was still frightened by Tan Xiu's words and felt weak all over. Boss, 20,000 volts. Activate the strongest electric current state. Mo Ao's expression was somewhat calm as he said after operating the power unit. Tan Xiu didn't remove the 2 wires from his body. He had already felt the more violent electric current drilling into his body. The electric current surged in his body. He could even clearly feel that some hidden impurities in his body were burned out by the electric current without him noticing. Moreover, his heartbeat increased by a beat and his blood circulation speed was a little faster than before. That kind of numb feeling was also a lot stronger, causing the cell division of his body to accelerate a little. But only a little. Double it again. Tan Xiu said in a deep voice. Chu Yuan couldn't help but shiver and exclaim, "Don't." Mo Ao ignored Chu Yuan and directly increased the power to 40,000 volts. The boss used his own body to experiment. He was somewhat looking forward to it because Tan Xiu had told him that once the plan to use electric current to refine the body was feasible, it would be of great benefit to cultivators like them. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.